Good afternoon, everyone. That's not the on?
Yeah, it's on.
Can I be quiet, please? Thank you very much. And good afternoon again, everybody. Item 1, announcement by the Mayor and Chief Exec. There is no announcements by myself or the Chief Exec, but there will be a break at 7 o'clock for 10 minutes. Okay. Item 2, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have apologies from Councillors Melanie Stephen, Tim Bamford and Kath Taylor. And Councillor Michael Watson is coming, but he's delayed, so he'll be here shortly.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Sokol.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Please excuse me my horrible face. I'm here. Apology from Councillor Fran Parry. Is you working? Yeah. Councillor Amanda Pinnick, Councillor Fajila Lunet, Councillor Gwen Lowe, Councillor Nosheen Dodd, and Councillor Amma Anba. Yeah, I'm here. Don't worry. I think Councillor Masarat Parvez, she coming a bit late, yeah.
I've also been informed Councillor Zaman is also running late as well. Just I'll let you know. Councillor Munro.
Yes, I'd just like to give apologies for Councillor... Hello, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to give apologies for Councillor Kath Pinnock. She's busy at the House of Lords. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Paul White sends his apologies. He's chairing a school governors meeting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the council held on 7th of September 22 be approved as a correct record. Is that seconded?
Seconded, Mr Mayor.
Please vote by show of hands. That's carried. Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Members who have any disposable pecuniary interests which would prevent them from discussing or voting on any item should disclose their interest now. Are there interests to declare? No. Okay. Good. Thank you. Item 5, petitions from members of the council. Are there any petitions to be submitted? I'm not looking at you, Councillor Bolt. Okay. Item 6, deputations, petitions from members of the public. There are no deputations this evening. Item... I was going to say that. I missed my sheet. Are there any public petitions? No. Okay. Item 7, public question time. Are there any public questions? No. Thank you. Okay. Item 8, page 11, Communities Partnership Plan, reference from Cabinet. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I'm introducing and moving the adoption of the 2022-27 Community Partnership Plan. This is a statutory plan which has been developed by the Kirklees Community Partnership Board, and it forms part of our policy framework. It's a strategy which has been born out of partnership, which is ever more important. We cannot change or improve the life experiences of our communities on our own. This has been shown to be particularly so over the last few years, ranging from COVID to more recent upsetting incidents. So in March 2020, we faced the greatest challenge of our lifetime. The response from residents, partners and the council to the COVID-19 pandemic was incredible. I've said many times how proud I was, and still am, of the hard work and dedication that went into protecting each other and our communities at that time. As well as that community resilience, another positive to come out of the pandemic was that it strengthened our partnerships in Kirklees at all levels. This partnership plan benefits from those strengthened relationships and outlines our key strategic community safety priorities for Kirklees, which the Partnership Board has reviewed and renewed. We will still continue to review these priorities to ensure that they reflect the needs of our residents and of our communities. The terribly sad events of the last few weeks have been a stark reminder that no city or town can be complacent about knife crime and protecting young people. Equally, the way in which violence against women and girls in society has been tragically brought back into the spotlight over the last 18 months. Nationally or locally, incidents of knife crime and incidents of violence against women and girls are frightening for any community. While the plan does focus on addressing violence, it also provides a strategic approach to addressing other community safety concerns which impact on our residents' lives. Road safety, antisocial behaviour, hate crime, burglary, and a new one, water safety. If not addressed appropriately, these all influence about how we feel about our local area. That's why I encourage even, colleagues to approve this plan. Whilst we've seen very positive results from projects undertaken with communities and partners to address these issues, we don't underestimate the challenge ahead of us. There's more work to do, and we cannot tackle these issues alone. We are working with West Yorkshire Police, Combined Authority, and crucially, the community, amongst others, who will help guide our work. The key to our activity and future activity is that it engages with our residents. Our approach is to listen, connect, and make sure our response is owned by the people who live here. And of course, we've already previously approved the Inclusive Communities Framework, which this is a perfect example of. We are fortunate to have dedicated communities and partners here in Kirklees who echo my desire for Kirklees residents to live, work, study in safe communities that they are proud of. I'm determined to ensure the Council and its partners work tirelessly to deliver this. Residents, communities and partners are central to this plan, and we must continue to work side by side to efficiently deliver safer communities. So I move the recommendations that are 12.1 and 12.3. I don't know what happened to 12.2 on page 18 of your agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parson. Is that seconded?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second that and reserve the right.
Thank you, Councillor Pando. Are there any comments on this matter? Yeah. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I first thank Carol Patterson for her comments? I particularly agree with what she said about the strength of our communities and coming out of the pandemic. I think that's worth revisiting again. I have two comments to make, really, that I think, first of all, I think we could have been more ambitious with this report in terms of target setting, because we need a plan that is measurable in its success. And although there are things on the pages which say, well, how are we going to measure this? Well, you know, we will have succeeded if there is a reduction in whatever. If we're only going by last year's figures, a reduction can mean a reduction of 1 in thousands. And I think we ought to have been more specific and perhaps a little bit more ambitious in the target that we've set there. But my particular worry about this is to do with accountability. And this follows on from partnership working, because I think we're all in favour of partnership working. It's sometimes the only way that things can be sorted out. But it does lead to a certain lack of accountability sometimes. And I would give you an example of a case. This is a bit of an amalgam of several cases, but it gives you the flavour of what I wanted to say, which is that if we have, for instance, a case of antisocial behaviour, and we've got someone in one of our properties, one of our Kirklees properties, who's causing a big nuisance because they have certain addictions and they've got a mental health problem. So not entirely their fault that they behave this way, but it's having its effect on the neighbours. And then we have a family that lives next door who are suffering this night after night, knocking on the walls, swearing at the children, throwing things at the property and all this. And this is going on for a matter of months. And unfortunately, we've got to a stage where I can't get to the root of who is actually accountable for sorting this out. And this is the problem with the partnership working, because we've got the police involved, as you would expect. We've got our own Safer Kirklees involved. There's the health services involved, the mental health services. We've also got housing involved because it's a council house issue. We've now, because of the effect on the children, the school is involved, and the child and adolescent mental health service is now also involved. So this gets to 7 or 8 different bodies who are all interested in the resolution of this case. And I'm sure they all want it to be sorted out. But at the end of the day, what we've got is a situation where actually nothing's moving forward, because the police will dib in with, oh, we've made a couple of visits, fine. And Safer Kirklees will dib in with, well, we've asked them to keep a log, which they've been doing for 18 months, and nobody's actually done anything with it yet. And all these people are dibbing in. But what I think we require is one person or one officer, somebody, a named individual, that will actually take the responsibility to say to that family, we're going to sort this out for you. I am going to make sure that this is tackled. And for that person then to do the liaison with all the partners. Because at the moment, I feel that I'm doing the liaison with all the partners, and I don't think I'm the best placed person to do that, because, it's not our jobs as councillors. I mean, we employ people to sort these things out. And so that's my worry, is to do with accountability. And it actually raises itself on a broader level as well about the accountability of this plan, because, who ultimately is accountable for the performance against the measures that have been put in this plan. Now, I take it, because there's a nice picture of Councillor Pattison at the front, it's probably Councillor Pattison, and the chief policeman that's also in there. But I have a suggestion to make, and I think it's one I would make about most plans and policies or strategies that are passed by this council. If this council passes a policy or a strategy, for instance tonight, in a year's time, whoever is accountable for making sure that policy has been carried out, strategy...
We've got 30 seconds, Councillor Hall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Should come back to council and tell us how they've done, so that we can all hold the people to account. And I just fear that, OK, it's a very large document. What I don't want is for things like this to just be sat on a shelf and then not brought out. We really need to hold to account what it says in it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Homewood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a really important issue for me, particularly on looking at how we can tackle violence, knives and guns. And before I make my comments on the report, I just wanted to put on record at the council my condolences to Karen McLean's family and all the people, particularly young people, who've been affected by what happened in Fartown a few weeks ago. I won't say any more than that, but I just want to make sure that's on the record there. So I just wanted to mainly focus on this strategic priority 1 around tackling violence, abuse and exploitation. And I think it's really important that we have a plan like this and that we work together as a partnership, because I think we can't, these are such broad issues that we can't deal with just as a council or just as the police, and actually we need national government's help on a lot of these issues as well. So I think it's really important that we have this plan, and I'm glad to see it. I think for me, the first thing I just wanted to reference was, I think, again, looking at what we can learn from what's happened in the past. And I'm really happy to see how we've got the focus here on the exploitation that comes alongside crime and violence, because I think we need to learn from what we've seen nationally in terms of child sexual exploitation, that we can't just determine that people are bad people, particularly children are bad children. We know that in Huddersfield and across the country, there are young people that are being groomed into crime. And I think we need to do everything we can to deal with that and take it really, really seriously. I believe we are doing, but I think it's something we need to keep at the forefront of everything that we're doing. I think working with the third sector and voluntary organisations, again, is really, really crucial. One of the things that comes out to me, and I think we all know this, is that, particularly in this area, we get a lot of short-term interventions and activities and funding, and I think we need to think about where we've got such big issues in certain areas, how can we have that strategic plan to make sure those interventions can continue long-term and we can have a long-term strategy. So I'd definitely like to build on that in terms of what's in this plan. There is a mention in here around, it talks about embedding a trauma-informed approach, and I understand what that means, and I think we need to extend that out to understand what impact violent crime has on the community and the trauma that's experienced in the community, particularly among young people and children. I've been in the past, speaking to people on a doorstep where a parent is crying and telling me that the children are traumatised because of something that they've seen outside their house. So I think how we deal with that and how we make sure those support services are in place for young people is really important. And I just wanted to touch again, Councillor Hall mentioned this, just around some of the targets. I think it's important that we do have targets, but I think we do really need to drill down a little bit more into that and get more specific on that, along with the police, because I did note in the foreword that the Chief Inspector said, we've seen a reduction in some of this violent crime in the last few years. I think if you speak to people in places like in Deaton, for example, in my area, I don't think that's something that people would necessarily say that they're seeing. So I think we need to look at it, we can maybe say holistically in Kirklees the number of people carrying a knife has reduced, but has the impact that people are actually feeling, have we done enough, I guess, to really address that? And I agree, does one less person carrying a knife mean we've really addressed the issue? But I am at least happy that we've got those in there, because I think sometimes there can be a view, we've done something, give ourselves a pat on the back. No, we need to actually make sure it has that desired impact. So that's all I really want to say. I'm looking forward to working closely on this and having our local action plans and really looking at the work that we can do. And I do believe from the discussions I've had more recently that there has been a move forward, particularly in the council, about really focusing on this issue. So I look forward to that, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for letting me speak.
Thank you, Councillor Homewood. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thanks to Carol and the team who brought forward the report, and thanks to the officers who came to groups to answer questions and take suggestions. It's always a challenge to enter a group room armed only with a sheaf of paper, but it does mean that we've all had sight of this and we've all had a chance to contribute. So that said, I'll keep my comments to the updated key priorities. In priority 1, tackling violence and abuse, there are a couple of things that jump out in that table there. The first is the word challenge. It's not there. We don't get the sense that we're prepared to challenge our partners in this work. Work collaboratively by all means, but they must be challenged as well where there are failures. We should be able to have robust discussions with them, preferably in public, not always available, of course, but to make sure that our residents are getting something that works for them locally, not an alignment to the West Yorkshire Police crime plan. An example would be the CPS stats on the reduction in rape convictions. We know that that will affect confidence in reporting. Public confidence in reporting is key to reducing any crime. If these are resource issues, we need to know so we can lobby government. If they're systemic issues, then the houses need to be cleared. I won't dwell on the antisocial aspect of the document. We've all got experience of this in our wards, but I do think, though, that we could take the learning from the really good work we did through COVID and repurpose it. We managed then to have conversations with hard-to-reach members of our communities. It takes manpower, of course, and that's in short supply. But I do wonder sometimes if we fight shy of residents and we should be talking to them. It's right that inclusivity and resilience should be here. A full-scale commission on inclusion is currently on ice, and maybe it's time to look at that again with a view to making some focused sprints in key areas. We might not be able to commit vast resources to it, but again, we can start dialogues, we can be visible, and we can have a clear view of current realities. The reducing risk element is to be welcomed too. We hope not to be a nanny state, of course, but we can try our best to make risk informed. If you do X, then Y sometimes will and usually does happen. I'm pleased to see that the Water Safety Initiative is here. I recently witnessed a drowning fatality at the coast, and too many young people die on our inland waters. On speeding, I did notice there was a speeding thing, and there's a motion on speeding later on in the agenda. You'll see the Liberal Democrat amendment to today's motion details a very concrete step we should be lobbying on, which is the transferal of powers to fine low-level speeding offences to council officers. Of course, with a concomitant revenue, we need that money. The rollout of the Batley and Spen model of police partnership on speeding should be looked at as a priority for the borough. It's been very good for our residents. What I'd say is, in short, it's right that this should be brought forward now, even if it's just for a statutory reason, but it seems light on detail on the how and light on initiative and actual concrete ideas. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to talk about one particular aspect of the antisocial behaviour section, and that's to do with antisocial behaviour on the roads. Councillor Lawson has already alluded to this, and also to the fact that in Batley and Spen, the police have been doing extra time, as it were, funded by local councillors. You might say, well, perhaps they ought to be doing it anyway, but that's the fact that it's happening and is being appreciated is a good thing, because antisocial behaviour on the roads is, to my mind, and I'm not belittling some of the other subjects like Councillor Homewood's been talking about, but it's pernicious. It affects people in very subtle ways, particularly if they live near a busy road, which is subject to a lot of antisocial driving. Some people won't want to go out because they're scared. And I don't think enough emphasis is given in this document to this problem, which can blight communities. I mean, it's always been there. It came to light a bit more during the lockdown, when some people seemed to delight in going out and driving in really rather dangerous and exhibitionist ways. But I just think that this form of antisocial behaviour is not given the prominence that it needs, simply because its effects aren't necessarily felt straight away. But it happens all the time. Loads of times I've been out walking and seen somebody driving in a really unacceptable way, you know, sort of 50 miles an hour and a 30 mile an hour limit kind of thing. But things don't get reported. I don't quite know how you do that because the car's gone before you're able to do anything about it. Perhaps we should all carry our cameras around with us to see if we can snap these things as they're happening. But it is a problem, and I would certainly encourage the police to do more if they're able, not necessarily with the help of money from us, but and I would recommend other parts of Kirklees to try that out because it has been successful. But I mean, generally speaking, I don't have an issue with the document, but I think it's a bit light on that subject, which can have quite detrimental effects on some people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Paula Davies.
Thank you. It's a really great report, and I'm really in support of all the working together and the cohesiveness. What I want to just bring to the fore and bring to people's minds is about the funding and the costings behind it. We learnt during COVID how we could react flexibly and quickly where we needed to. But I think we just need to be mindful of that flexibility and how we fund some of the activities we do, some of the engagements we have. Let me backtrack a little. In Almondbury, we've had a lot of work done with our youth group. We've engaged and surveyed. We've assessed what the young people in Almondbury want. We've got plans in place. We have a 12-month plan of activities. We have things working in there. We are being told that we can apply for funding, and funding is there in the future, and we can apply for it. We have issues in the area now, not only in Almondbury. I know there's other areas as well, but I just want to bring to mind people about having some flexibility to act immediately when there are hotspots. We've had issues in the last 2 weeks that are creating tensions and creating divisiveness and just tension and anger within the communities, and fear in the young people, fear in the parents of those people, of those young people as well. And yes, I know the numbers of actual crimes are generally dropping, but the targeting here is about the perception. Increase the percentage of young people who report that they feel safe in their neighbourhoods to above 75%. We need to be acting very, very quickly to that now, because the perception is that they're not as safe as they were. That's my plea, is about flexibility and speed of response. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Anthony Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to pick up on the item on page 66 regarding fly tipping. And I welcome that it's noted that fly tipping has been on the rise, although it's not a welcome development, it's a welcome recognition. I don't know if members of the Chamber will remember, but the Liberal Democrats did propose an amendment to allow some free collection of bulky waste. I don't think we're going to get a handle on this issue unless we look at providing our residents with easy, viable and safe methods of disposing of waste, and in particular bulky waste. So I'd ask that the Cabinet and the people who are in this chamber just consider that, and consider how, by offering alternatives to fly tipping, where people can easily and cheaply get rid of the waste, that may have a big impact, and in the end up costing the council much less than it does to deal with the fly tipping. I'd also like to note that there's not really any mention of how we're doing with prosecuting on fly tipping. I know there's been a drive and some improvement on that, but that would have been nice to see as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Michael Watson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You need a plan. You always need a plan. But my concern with this, and this is something that I've seen in the commercial sector many times over the years, is that a lot of work can be put into a plan and then it ends up sitting in a drawer and nothing ever happens with it. And my concern with this is that whilst there are some very noble objectives set out. Ultimately, I'm not quite sure, I don't really understand who is going to come into work on a Monday morning, pick this plan up, work through it, what they're going to do as a consequence of that, and at the end of the week when they go home on a Friday, they will say, I've done a good job because I've delivered on that plan. There are some things in it that I just don't understand. If we look at the circle on page 9, it talks about place-based, victim-centred, lived experience, tackling inequality. I mean, there's a number of ways you can tackle. If we're going to tackle inequality, what will be that product that that person looks at on a Friday at 5 o'clock and goes home thinking, I have done my job, I've tackled inequality? I genuinely don't understand what that looks like. And therefore, what I struggle with here is actually implementation. Having read through this, I really do not understand. The objectives are great. We all want nicer places to live. We want to be safer. We want clean places. We don't want fly tipping. But if one looks at the objective in relation to fly tipping, it seems to be to reduce the success on that Friday evening will be reducing the overall level of fly tipping in Kirklees below 6,017 incidents. So if we've got 6,016 incidents, we can head off down to the pub on a Friday night, giving ourselves a big slap on the back, saying that we've achieved the objective of the plan. Well, that for me doesn't work. That's not ambitious enough. So really what I would say is, good start, nice idea, but it really needs to drill down into the detail and what the detail looks like in delivery, implementation, and smart objectives. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Mark Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. A few months ago, it saddened me that going to see Inspector Calpin in our local constituency, that asking her to do something extra for our wards in the local area, she was unable to pay for overtime for several of the officers to conquer the driving ASB that we were all suffering from in the constituency. What made me a lot happier was when I instigated a few phone calls and emails to every ward councillor in the constituency, and everyone cross-party agreed that we should do something about it. And we did. For several months, we contributed through ward funds to pay for overtime for the police. And in the first quarter, had an additional 360 arrest tickets, and it was a great success. My point being that we collectively can do something about things, not just in a plan, but actions that we take on a daily basis can contribute to helping with what our residents see on a daily basis, which is the crimes of ASB, bike crimes, driving ASB. It's the things that we're judged on as far as crimes concerned on a daily basis in our wards and constituencies. So I am aggrieved on one side that we had to do that, but I am happy that in the knowledge that we can, when we work together, do something about it on a regular basis. I would ask, rather than a plan that would take massive action, maybe drawing our now MPs into this as far as funds and action, and also our mayor to help us so that we don't have to continually fund police overtime on a regular basis, and it can be done from other ways, other measures. So that's one thing. The other thing is a little bit more contentious, which is what I believe as far as the police recruitment and the numbers that we need on the beat is hampered by what I see as diversity and inequality as far as the recruitment process is concerned. We have in our ward several individuals, university students, that just happen to be white male that have been turned down temporarily and over the last few months by the police recruitment process because West Yorkshire Police haven't filled their quota on women and other minority groups. I think that we should agree that what we need as far as West Yorkshire is concerned is good police, and we need them quickly, and we need them on the beat to help us with the problems that we're all seeing on a daily basis in our wards and constituencies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Martin Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues have commented on the inclusion on this of the strategic priority for reducing risk, particularly the risk of drowning in open water. So therefore, could I make a plea to the Cabinet Member and others on this? When they are talking to the partners in this, like Canal and Rivers Trust, if they could ask them to be more receptive to partnership ideas. Some while ago, Murfield Town Council offered a partnership to the Canal and Rivers Trust to co-fund lifelines along the waterways through Murfield. We'd seen this in York and Leeds. Similar to defibrillators, these lifelines will be at the side of open water and accessible in an emergency. The barriers put in place by Canal and River Trust, including funding geophys surveys and things like that, was not a partnership, it was an obstacle. So hopefully, if Canal and River Trust are mentioned in this, for those of us who have open water through our wards, could we ask Councillor Pattison and others to take it back and ask them to get the finger out and be more approachable to community partnerships? The strategic priority 2, Mr. Mayor, reducing antisocial behaviour. Again, a plea when Cabinet and others are talking to partners about reducing threats, intimidation, environmental issues, nuisance, speeding vehicles, rowdy behaviour, that they ask the police to refer to the operational advice for trespassing on land without consent and unauthorised encampment, as produced by the National Police Chiefs Council. It used to be called ACPO, the Association of Chief Police Officers. So all the chief officers sit around and produce operational guidance, in this case for the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act 2022. We're told that when we had an illegal encampment in Murfield, the actions had been agreed by the council, which was that very little would change and the new law was not being enacted. According to this, Mr. Mayor, the operational guidance by the police, that there is a new offence relating to residing on land without consent, in or with a vehicle, as introduced by the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act. And that is, they can be removed from the area if a person fails to comply with a request to leave as soon as reasonably practical. That request being from a representative of the landowner. So if an officer, or potentially a councillor, asks an illegal person who's camping on land illegally to go, and they don't, then they are committing a criminal offence, Mr. Mayor, according to the National Police Chiefs Council. So why aren't this council turning around to our partners and saying to the police, enforce the law as it stands? Why should it come back down to civil court cases for us to remove people from land when the powers have been given to the constabulary? Mr. Mayor, it doesn't require a senior police officer. It is specific in this that the person who can instruct someone illegally occupying land is a constable. So a warranted constable can tell someone to leave the land. A warranted constable can tell people when they're queuing up, like in Norristhorpe for colleagues or Murfield, and queuing up down the road, they can tell them to move on, rather than letting them come on in larger numbers. So again, it's partnership and understanding. So can we ask our representatives to ensure that these new laws are enacted for the benefit of our communities, Mr. Mayor? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Councillor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I should say it's a really important document, this. It's really extensive, and it's obviously come together via the partnership working of a lot of work. And what we've got to remember is that if this wasn't here, there'd certainly be a lot of shouting around about where is the strategy, where is the plan. So it's important to remember that there are senior officers working on this throughout West Yorkshire, and it's complex work. And what it tells us is that through consultation with ourselves, members of the public and other partners, there is a really deep and even broad understanding of what's going on in Kirklees. This is familiar. There can't anybody be sat here that doesn't see familiarities in their ward with what's in here. It's familiar. And because it's familiar, that's really important, because it resonates and it's usable for us. We know what's in there, it's familiar to us. So it means that the conversations that are happening in these consultations, in these senior officer meetings, are appropriate. People know what they're talking about because they're informed by us. I just want to challenge Councillor Watson on what he said about the plan and do people use it or not, and what does it really mean on a Friday night. And I just want to give some confidence to people that people do absolutely use it. The people that use it are the officers at West Yorkshire Fire and at West Yorkshire Police and at Kirklees Council and in probation services. Senior officers do sit down from the highest to the lowest, from the highest rank to the lowest rank, with these plans, and they disseminate the information into usable strategies at a local level. That happens, and I can give you confidence that that happens. And we need to make sure that that confidence goes from us out to the public as well, because this is not disjointed. It's not disjointed at all. I want to add some further confidence to one of the assertions that, and I can only speak for fire, but I have confidence in police as well, is that positive action recruitment is not there to alienate and restrict anybody from joining public services. It's there partly to level the playing field. And every police officer, firefighter, council workers that recruited, it's done so on their merits. No one gets a leg up by accident. No one is like twisted their arm or pushed in there when they're not really qualified and not suitable and not passing the tests. People are passing their tests and they're getting through on their merits. That's different. Positive action training is about getting people onto a level playing field, and so I think it's important from this chamber that we make that really clear to people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donovan. Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for all the comments that have come in, a lot of good feedback. But one thing I was concerned about hearing from one of our councillors, that inequalities and equalities hampers policing. And I think Darren has touched on some of the things I was going to talk about. But for policing to be effective, Mr Mayor, we need good police officers. That's a given. But we have to make sure that we reflect the communities we serve. You know, we want more police that are women. We want more police that are BAME. We want more police that come from LGBT communities. And the list goes on. Let me just give you one statistic, Mr Mayor, one police officer gave me recently. There was a 17% decline of black African police officers leaving the service, West Yorkshire Police. Now, 17% sounds quite high. You think that there's like loads that are leaving. But it was actually 2 black African police officers leaving. So you can see that our communities need to reflect what the public services are there for. And I'll give you my own example, Mr Mayor. Many decades ago, and it is decades, I started off in this council as a PAT trainee, positive action trainee. I was not given any leg up or any professional treatment. I was just given the opportunity to be able to compete on a level playing field, being able to provide me with the skills and the qualifications, then I could then apply for jobs on a level playing field and get the right qualifications. So I take issue, I don't agree with what Councillor Mark Thompson said.
Can we have one conversation, please?
Diversity and inclusion is part and parcel of the fabric of our community.
Thank you.
And we get better policing, we get better communities, and we get better outcomes if all our public services, including the police, are representative. And I, for one, will actually do everything I can to address all forms of inequalities, all forms of discrimination, and make sure that we are truly reflective of the communities we serve. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pando. Councillor Patterson, you've got the right to reply.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, thanks everybody for all those different comments, and they are useful and helpful, especially the one about my photo. I did ask them to change it, but next time, please. But anyway, it is an ambitious plan. We have upped the ante this time. We have listened to what people are saying. I mean, this plan, compared to the one before, is a lot more hard-hitting on crime, or well, on violent crime, sorry, than previously. So we are trying to be ambitious in this. But just to give everybody an assurance, I mean, we have got the Chief of Police, the Chief Fire Officer, the Chief of Probation, the Director of Children's Services, all sitting on this Community Partnership Board. This is a strategy at its highest level. Hence, you can't see necessarily the detail and the action plans and the targets, etc., because there is a strategic delivery group below that takes instruction from that board to then implement this strategy. It's not a plan, it's a strategy. I mean, if you look on page 15 or 35, you'll see there how there is the partnership board, then the strategic delivery board, and how that then beds down into all those people that do leave the office on a Friday thinking, yeah, I did get that lifebuoy on the river or on the lake at such and such. So those sorts of things are what we're obviously looking for in the end. I won't respond to all the comments, but the example that Councillor Hall gives is a brilliant example, I think, of non-partnership working. Everyone's working in silos there, and this is about trying to bring all those people together and perhaps saying to somebody, one of the bodies involved, yes, you be the lead person on this one, I don't know, depends on the situation. But yes, you've got to work together and not in silos. So I think you've given a beautiful example of why this partnership working is actually needed. To say the targets are there in the detail, but not in this particular document. This document would be 3 or 4 times longer if you wanted to see all that. But no, we do take on board everything that you have to say. I think Councillor Pandora has already addressed questions of inequality or how we would want this plan, or rather strategy, to ensure that there was inclusivity right across the partnership board. So thank you again.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. We'll now go to a vote of show of hands. Roll call for those for. Those against? Abstain? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, item 9, page 95, Corporate Governance and Audit Committee, terms of reference. Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it's item 9, page 95, which is the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee terms of reference. So I am moving, number 1, that the Council amend the terms of reference of Corporate Governance and Audit Committee as described in paragraph 2.3. And the second is that the Council note and endorse the arrangements for the appointment of an independent person in accordance with the role profile as set out at Appendix 2 and the methodology as set out at Appendix 3.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Is that seconded?
No.
Any comments on this matter? Okay, no comments. Right to reply, Councillor Hussain.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. We'll now go to a vote. Roll of call, show of hands. Those for? Those against? Any abstain? That's carried. Thank you. Item 10, page 105, member attendance rules. Councillor Sokal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the Council note the non-attendance of Councillor Fran Perry and give approval to the waiver of Section 85(1) of the Local Government Act 1972, permitting Councillor Perry to continue to be member of the council and adding a 6-month period for her continued recovery.
Thank you, Councillor Sokal. Is that seconded?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd like to second that and reserve the right.
Okay. Right to reply, Councillor Sokal. Okay. We'll go to vote. Show of hands, those for. Any against? Any abstain? That's carried. Thank you. Item 11, written questions to the leader, cabinet members, chairs of committees, nominated spokesperson. A written schedule of submitted questions has been circulated. I will now invite members to ask their questions in turn. The appropriate members will respond. One supplementary question to each submitted question is permitted. Councillor Richard Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a question for the leader. What are you doing to assist Kirklees residents with the cost of living?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And it's a very important question and a very crucial question in terms of what we're seeing that's happening on the back of the cost of living crisis. Mr Mayor, with your permission, what I will do is I'll try and just be very, very brief and set the context, and then I'll pass on to my colleague, Councillor Paul Davies, who will then give you further details on what we're doing. Because households, business and public services are going to actually face probably the biggest challenges that we have ever faced. We thought austerity was bad. That's seen the council reduce in half the size, so we don't have the same legroom or the same flexibility in terms of what we can do in terms of public services cuts. Also, we saw a public finance article recently that there are 60 councils that are on the verge of going bankrupt. Section 114 notice has been served. And the leader of the LGA, my good friend, Councillor James Jamieson, just yesterday he wrote an article that actually highlighted that there's an extra 2.4 billion pressures that have been put on public finances, local government, since last March, within a year. Next year, there's going to be a gap of £3.4 billion for public services, local government in particular, and the year after, that gap increases to £4.5 billion. So we need a plan, and I'm really pleased that today Liz Truss was asked the question that will there be any cuts to public services, and I'm really pleased that she said that there won't be. So hopefully, we're all saved. Anyway, Mr Mayor, the projected shortfall in council finances since 2010 up to 2020, not counting the years after, is equated at 15 billion just for local government. We've got in 4 levelling up bids. I'm hoping that we'll get some news on that, but Michael Gove is no longer there, and I hope that the new Minister, Simon Clarke, will look at public services, local government in a positive way. So cuts to public services, Mr Mayor, is probably going to be high on the agenda. In terms of what we're doing locally, I'll now pass on to my colleague, Councillor Paul Davies, who will finish my answer off. Thanks, Paul.
Yep, thank you, Leader. Yep, I think it goes without saying that Kirklees residents are now facing the worst crisis in a generation. Inflation is currently at a near 40-year high. So very clearly as a council, we want to try and ensure that everybody that needs support gets the support, and we do our best to achieve that. As we've talked previously, we know we can't mitigate all of the issues, but certainly we've put in place a plan which helps us get some way towards that. And if you recall at last council in September, I outlined a plan with 3 areas of focus. Firstly, there's the emergency or crisis response, and that involves a whole range of areas, including obviously the Household Support Fund, where we receive funding from government, the council tax energy rebate, also areas of looking at improving access to food, affordable food, crisis food, and also warm spaces. And on top of that, what can we do to improve welfare advice? Alongside all of that runs targeted communications. Crucial that we have a strategy, and we have one that's in place, to ensure that residents, community groups and businesses know what help there is and how to access that help. Secondly, we're looking at building resilience within our communities, because it's not just about the short term, it's about how do we help those communities going forward. And this includes the work that we're doing around skills and employment advice, the Works Better programme, about place-based support through libraries and community services. I think this is crucial to create and try and help with that resilience and sustainability within communities. And thirdly, we have the extremely important but far more difficult area of prevention. And this is about creating a sustainable economy within Kirklees to help prevent further crises. This again focuses on strong local places and very much focuses on the work that we're doing on a strategy with the VCSE area. And clearly it reflects the work that we're doing around our small town investment, our investments in Huddersfield, Dewsbury and regeneration programmes as a total. So our approach is across those 3 areas. Clearly, at the moment, short-term crisis help is something that we are really putting a priority on, and we've talked about that in detail. I won't go through the various things in any more detail than that, but very happy to talk to anyone about those at a later date. One thing we talked about at Council last time is the crucial role all of us as councillors play. You know, we are leaders in our communities, and clearly we have a role.
Councillor Davis, you've had your 5 minutes.
Oh.
Thank you, sorry about that. Supplementary, Councillor Smith.
Thanks. We'll see if we can get a straight answer this time without a long-winded, waffly response. I mean, there's always a risk with asking this kind of question, isn't there? That you're going
Smith,
to...
Kenny Smith, can you just stick to the question, please?
Well,
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, but, you know, we have to listen to this political grandstanding about national politics. It gets a little bit boring month after month, doesn't it? You know, what I asked was what the council were doing, and it's easy for the leader to just go back to his cheap political point scoring about national politics. You know, when this council, under his leadership, continues to put council tax up every year...
Mr Smith, can you stick to the question,
I'm coming to the question, Mr Mayor.
Can you get to the question?
My question is, I feel like I've been provoked a little bit by the nonsense I've just listened to. Can you help me? Can you help me, leader? You know, because when we had local elections recently, the Labour Party was putting out literature, and it was banded around all over social media by your colleagues in the Kirklees Labour Party about...
Councillor Smith, question, please.
I've cut him off. I've cut him off. Move on. Move on.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Pando. Councillor Davis.
Yep, sure. I'm not sure what Councillor Smith was listening to, but and I think you should have listened to what I was saying. It was all about what the council... I think to be fair, it's quite insulting to our frontline teams who are spending time supporting our citizens for Councillor Smith to sit there and play politics and not recognise the work that those teams are doing. And I'm sorry the whole, if you're talking about playing politics, the whole of your contribution was all about that. And I'm sure Councillor Boat will give you some advice on that as he's whispering in your ear as well. Listen to what we're saying rather than your predetermined views. And then if you want to comment on what we're saying, fine. But I outlined what we're doing. I outlined what we did at council and what we're doing in delivering. We are proud of our connections with our communities. We are proud of what we're doing. If you think that providing affordable food, if you think the work that we're doing to connect with voluntary organisation is a laugh and a joke, then maybe you're probably in the same line as your leaders in government.
Councillor Davis, thank you.
And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, moving on to question 2. Councillor McGuinn, Cabinet Member for Culture. Councillor.
Hi. I asked a question about the capacity of Huddersfield Crematorium at July's meeting. After checking on the booking system on Wednesday, 5th October, there are only bookings until 12:15 being taken. Will Councillor Simpson amend his answer given at July's meeting?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much, Bernard, for your question. In July's meeting, you asked me when we were expecting to be operating at full capacity following the installation of the new cremators. I said our expectation was in September. There has subsequently been a very slight delay due to a snagging issue with the doors on the new cremators, which I gave you the full details of, as you know, on email subsequent to the meeting, and said that we suspect to have it resolved with the contractor in a few weeks. So no, I don't think it would make much sense for me to amend an honest answer that was accurate at the time it was given, but I'd be more than happy to provide a further update should you so request one.
Councillor McGuinn, got a supplementary question?
You implied that the cremation was working at full capacity, that the burners were working, when in fact they weren't. They were being put into action, yes, but they weren't actually operating at full capacity. And they still aren't working at full capacity. So the answer, in my opinion, was not correct. That you were saying that the incinerators were working, and they weren't. They were being put into operation. Anyway, does the council recognise the stress and hurt caused by delays owing to the refurbishment, and has the contractor faced any consequences due to this delay?
Councillor Simpson.
If you, as Councillor Smith very kindly pointed out in moments ago, these meetings are recorded and you can watch it back, Bernard, and you'll see that I told you that the installations have been completed, but the commissioning process hadn't been completed, so I never said that they were fully operational. In terms of providing a further update, they are now fully operational. The testing has been completed, and we're in a position to be able to increase the slots and bookings that are available at the crematorium. In preparation for doing this, we've consulted with a dozen of funeral directors and asked them how they feel it should be open to best accommodate them and obviously the essential service that they provide to local residents, as you say. The service is grateful to all of the funeral directors who've spoken with us, and we've taken on board their feedback, and they have been unanimous in their response, stating that capacity should be phased back in as they wanted to avoid service alterations that would have caused them significant disruption and logistical issues, which would have impacted on already booked services, which is of course something that we don't want to happen. Once confirmation was given to proceed by the contractor, the diary was open to additional slots, and this was actioned on the 6th of October. And an update was shared with funeral directors recently, informing them that as of the week commencing 31st of October, we'll be providing the 3 additional slots, which are going to be added, meaning we can do 8 rather than 5 per day, and the final 2 will be added on the week commencing the 7th of November, increasing operations back to full capacity then. So I hope that allays any concerns, and completely appreciate your question. So thank you very much, Bernard.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Question 3 from Councillor Andrew Pinnock to the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Transport Committee spokesperson, Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There have recently been considerable cuts in bus services via Riva in North Kirklees, about which I have had a number of complaints from local residents. What is the Combined Authority able to do to ensure that our public transport system is capable of providing users with ample opportunity to take advantage of the Mayor's recent fare offers.
Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Pinnock, for your question. Tracy Brabin, Mayor of West Yorkshire, working with West Yorkshire leaders, reached agreement with ministers to extend the bus recovery grant for a further 6 months to help protect passengers during the cost of living crisis. Local bus operators have said that if the grant ended as planned, which was at the start of October, they would withdraw services affecting up to 100 routes, which is around 1/6 of West Yorkshire's bus network. And although some of the bus operators have still proceeded with some cuts to services, it is clear that without this extension, there would have been a much greater impact on vital bus services. The Mayor is also rolling out cheap bus fares across the region, including a £2 cap on journeys. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Supplementary question, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Pinnock, can you press your button? Can you press your button?
I did. I don't.
Okay, now come on.
It has a life of its own. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
No, the point surely is to try and redouble our efforts, and I mean this is probably to be passed on to the Mayor, to get a proper franchise system in operation for bus services in West Yorkshire, so that we have more control. I'm not suggesting that we will have total control, but that there is a greater opportunity that we will get the bus services that we need and want. This is a question, really, and I just hope you're able to pass that on to the Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Butt.
Thank you for the supplementary question. So, Kirklees Council is working with West Yorkshire Combined Authority to bring forward a bus service improvement plan and asking bus operators to join an enhanced partnership with West Yorkshire Combined Authority and the district partners. This will set out plans for the bus network we wish to see, allow us to push for the restoration of cut services wherever possible, and have a greater say on improved bus services across Kirklees. It's also pertinent to let you know that the West Yorkshire Mayor, Tracy Brabin, will also be coming to a council meeting soon, so you'll be able to put your questions directly to her. And I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Question 4, Councillor Paul Davis. Question 2, Cabinet Member for Region, Councillor Turner.
Have the Council fully assessed the impact of rising capital borrowing costs and of their impact on the costs of the Huddersfield Blueprint and the Cultural Heart, especially as these will be in addition to the spiralling inflation and construction costs that are being felt in all sectors?
Councillor Turner.
Mr Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Davis, for the question. I can assure you that we are very aware of the risk of rising capital borrowing costs. As such, the capital plan across all areas, and not just the blueprints and the Cultural Heart, will continually be kept under review and updated as appropriate as part of the overall Council 23-24 and future year medium-term financial plan budget development. The use of a gateway method in our capital programme allows us to move forward in stages, which allows us the flexibility to amend and change programmes should the need arise for whatever reason. It should be specifically noted that recent reports on both the Cultural Heart and the George Hotel included both contingency and inflation increases built into the costs. The George Hotel set out a self-financing regeneration proposal, but also included sensitivity analysis on a range of scenarios, including increased interest rate sensitivities and the potential longer-term impact of those sensitivities against the baseline self-financing assumptions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Supplementary, Councillor Davis.
Thank you. That's great to hear about the reviews, the built-in reviews. My question is, can you commit to please keeping us updated of those reviews and making sure there is no shortfall? The last thing we want is for any of those plans to fail. We need to make sure that we can afford them and carry on with them. Thank you.
Councillor Turner.
Of course, when things change and reports
keeping a very close eye on interest rates and where they're likely to end up. And some of it is a best guess based on the best information we have at the moment, but we're doing the best we possibly can in a very, very uncertain world.
Question 5. Question 5. Councillor Paul Davis to Cabinet Member for Corporate. Councillor Paul Davis.
Have the council fully assessed the impact of rising... This is a different question. Have the council fully assessed the impact of rising energy costs and their impact on bills faced by the council in the running of council properties and public buildings?
Councillor Paul Davis.
Yep. Not confusing at all, two Davises at all, is it? Not whatsoever. And thanks very much for your question. Short answer is yes, but a little bit more detail for you. Certainly, within the forecast for a financial impact of the energy bills was in Q1, financial monitoring report to Cabinet in August, and it's in the MTFS update report to Council in September. Those are obviously estimates and forecasts, and I have to say at this point, it's extremely volatile, as we all know. Actions that we're taking already to limit the impact of the rises, we're now utilising a software that allows us to monitor and amend our heating systems remotely. And that's obviously with immediate effect. So, it's something you can do straight away. We're connecting more assets to that as we speak, and that's something that we're going to continue rolling out. We're also revisiting our energy statement and sharing with staff to ensure that all services have a buy-in to the plan, and working very closely with our teams on the ground, particularly our technical teams and caretakers in a number of areas. Be pleased to know TRVs, which I had to look for TVR, but it's a thermostat on a radiator, so we all know now. Nice three-letter acronym. We're setting those to 3. So, that sounds a bit of a silly, you think, well, that sounds silly, but you can imagine across our asset base what difference that will make in terms of the energy usage. So that's been done with immediate effect. We're also managing heating times and days more effectively, particularly around empty assets, and we're actually reducing where we can set points by 1 or 2 degrees. So individual radiators plus the overall thermostatic control as well. On top of that, we are totally mothballing some assets, and those assets as a complete mothball in terms of draining water, shutting down gas, electricity, etc. And that's continually being reviewed as well. So there are actions being taken. It is, again, I just keep saying, it's extremely volatile. And of course, something that you've already asked for, we will do our very best to come back and explain to Council where we are going with these plans.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Davis. Supplementary question, Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Last week, Wakefield Council announced they were having to shut their town hall because they couldn't afford to run it. Can you please confirm that in Kirklees will be keeping the lights and the heating on and not shutting libraries, leisure facilities, town halls and our public and community buildings? Thank you.
Councillor Paul Davis.
It is certain that I can't stand here and give absolute guarantees on every single part of our asset base, but absolutely it's our intention to keep libraries open and key community assets such as town halls. However, I think we all know that if things deteriorate further, then we may face some very difficult choices, but it is absolutely not our intention at this point to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Question 6, Councillor Anthony Smith to Cabinet Member for Transport, Councillor Firth. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are any Kirklees West Yorkshire Combined Authority funded projects at risk due to funding changes or gaps due to inflationary or other pressures?
Councillor
Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your question, Councillor Smith. In the light of inflationary and other pressures, the Wicker Finance, Resources and Corporate Committee on the 12th of July agreed to start a process to review the West Yorkshire Transport Fund and the Transforming Cities Fund programmes, as you would expect in these difficult times. While it is expected that the majority of the projects within these funds will continue to be developed and delivered, some projects may be delivered over a longer time frame to allow for new funding to become available. This review has been taking place over the summer, and the Wicklow Finance Resources and Corporate Committee will report in November of this year. Kirklees projects are impacted, and more information will be shared once the outcome of the review is known.
Thank you, Councillor. For supplementary question, Councillor Smith.
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for the response. So, does that represent an assurance that projects will not be cut and rather deferred as to when funding streams are available?
Councillor Firth.
That's correct.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Question 7, Councillor Anthony Smith to Cabinet Member for Environment, Councillor Mathers.
Thank you once more, Mr. Mayor. Could you clarify the Council's policy on materials used to replace and repair road or pavement surfaces on high-profile public and conservation areas?
Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for your question. Whenever possible, we always use material that are sympathetic with those used in the adjacent paved areas of the highway to ensure compatibility and consistency with existing materials, material palettes. In addition, we also endeavour to use locally sourced materials in accordance with our statutory duty to maintain the highway network under Section 41 of the Highways Act 1980. Our highways assets maintenance technicians will always programme the most suitable and value for money maintenance treatments available. This includes considering any future maintenance costs as part of our asset maintenance policies. This will mean reusing and recycling materials where possible, but on occasions we will need to use tarmac to ensure the location remains safe for the continued usage of the footpath by both pedestrians and vehicle traffic. Naturally, any work undertaken within a conservation area would include suitable materials and maintenance treatments, and any designs would be reviewed by colleagues within the conservation design team if appropriate. On major schemes, consideration is also made of those who may be impacted by the material used. For example, all designs take into account those suffering with dementia, and our teams are trained in dementia-friendly design. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mathers. Councillor Smith, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you for that response. I would argue on personal experience that the response is not borne out by the evidence. That is, of course, unless tarmac is a local and sympathetic material. I think we've only all got to walk a few feet down the road and look at New Street and see how sympathetic that particular restoration is. And I can point to examples everywhere. So my follow-up question is, what channels can councillors use to come back to officers where they believe that there is a legitimate case that a sympathetic material has not been used? Thank you.
Councillor Mathers.
By coincidence, Councillor Firth and I walked the town centre at lunchtime just to look at all the improvements and the sympathetic ways in which they've been carried out. I too noted those very things, and I will be having words with our officers. But I think on New Street, part of it isn't actually the council that's actually digging them up and doing the work. It's Yorkshire Water. So we will be getting in touch and making sure when the work is completed to the quality we expect of other partners working in our town centres and in all the localities across our wards and districts. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that we suspend Procedure Rule 12, paragraph 7, so that we can complete the business of written questions.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Can we be quiet, please? Question 8, Councillor Lukic. Question to the leader, Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am concerned that this year's increase to councillor allowances, despite warnings at the time, may be in excess of some members' expectations when the matter was considered last month. Will you please confirm the percentage increase to councillors' basic allowances that's currently expected, and whether you would consider, that is the leader, Councillor Pandor, whether you would consider that amount to be appropriate given the severe financial pressures the council is facing? Thank you.
Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Lukic. Just to remind you, the allowances are set by an independent review panel, which has got no bearing in terms of any politics or anything that plays out. It's a completely independent, robust process. The recommendations from that report...
Can we have one conversation at a time, please? Thank you.
Would have resulted in the cost being a lot higher than what we approved at last council meeting. Corporate Governance and Audit Committee did also have a look at this, and they had a robust debate. And their recommendations would have also cost more than what we approved at last council meeting. That's why the rationale behind putting forward what we did in terms of making sure that the members' allowances, any increase in SRAs or basic pay is linked to, and quite rightly so, to officer pay. We should not be in a position where we get any preferential treatment just because we are elected members. So we've made that direct link to officer pay. In line with what your question is about in terms of what the percentage is, negotiations are still taking place. Unison have already accepted the pay negotiations offer. We are still awaiting for the other two major unions, GMB and Unite. I don't know what the result of that is going to be. That result will come through sometime in October. But based on the offer on the table at the moment, on average, looking at the organisation as a whole, we're looking at a 7% increase. In terms of what each member feels, what their expectations are, I cannot comment. But one thing I do know, that I have members from across different parties coming to me and basically saying to me how extreme the cost of living crisis is, because we are also human beings. We are also having an impact on the energy pressures, the cost of living pressures, the food pressures, the fuel bill pressures, the mortgage pressures. But how each member feels, I can't comment because you need to ask them. But I do know that it's going to be tough, whoever you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Panda. Councillor Lukic, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, a very quick one. If the staff pay deal is confirmed at 7% and members feel that's excessive for members, is there a chance to bring that matter back to a future meeting to be reconsidered?
Councillor Panda.
Yeah, that debate has been had, that vote has been had, but Councillor Lukic, if you want to give your allowance back to the council, which I know some councillors do, then I'm sure that will be more than welcome, and I look forward to you putting your allowances back into the council, because you've raised the issue a number of times. You always raise an issue. You've been raising it since you were elected. So if you want to go back right to 3 years ago when you were elected and you want to give all that money back, I'm sure that would be really, really greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Panda. I just want to remind members that I will be having a break at 7. So I will go back to question 9. Councillor Lukic, to the Cabinet Member, Councillor Mathers.
Well, I'm happy to confirm I've no intention of retaining any excess amount in terms of my own allowance increases I've done in the past myself. I've given it to good causes before when I felt it was excessive. On to the question. Last week, to Councillor Mather, yes. Last week I received a letter from the Department for Transport that confirms its guidance for speed camera site selection is not mandatory and that non-compliance by local authorities does not provide any defence for speeding offences. The DFT has also confirmed that its guidance supports camera installation on roads that don't meet casualty limits but are still of community concern, and that our local casualty prevention partnership is free to set its own speed camera site criteria. Will you therefore please acknowledge that the A653 Leeds Road dual carriageway at Chidswell is a site of long-standing significant community concern over speeding, and agree that it should have permanent speed cameras installed?
Councillor Mathers.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Ukip. You really must speak to your fellow ward councillors, and if you did, you would know that they have been working closely with Wicker and the Deputy Mayor, Alison Lowe, on these very issues for a very long time. West Yorkshire Police Camera Enforcement Unit enforces speed legislation on the roads of West Yorkshire, including Kirklees, on behalf of the West Yorkshire Safety Camera Partnership. They are currently undertaking a review of their strategy to the future management of speed enforcement across the district. This may include a more proactive capability which allows for enforcement at sites of more local concern, as in this case, subject to any specific criteria being met. Councillor Lukic, your concerns about this locality at Chidswell are noted, and if there is a change of strategy which will enable speed enforcement to be considered for this location, we will forward the information to West Yorkshire Police Camera Enforcement Unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mathers. Councillor Lukic, do you have a supplementary question?
I'm happy to move on.
No, we're going to have a break for 10 minutes. Okay, members, we'll continue on question 10. Councillor Lukic to Cabinet Member for Corporate, Councillor Paul Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Davies, as I've discussed with you previously, not that long ago, mind, would you please provide an update on whether the Council will enable online reporting of traffic signal faults to help relieve some of the demand on the phone lines, and whether there are any other extensions planned to online reporting for common issues?
Councillor Davies.
Thanks. And you're right, it wasn't too long ago, but we did discuss this last week. And it is an issue that we want to cover and improve on. But we do actually provide a facility for reporting traffic signal faults. It's in a section called Report Other Road and Highways Problems. You're gonna like this. Under Reporting Step 2, the fact is we need to improve on that. And I've discussed this with the team, and they themselves recognise that although you can do it, it's not easy and it's not visible and it's not obvious. So they are absolutely working on that to see if we can signpost that more clearly and make it much easier as well. The Digital by Design programme has already moved thousands of contacts from the telephone system online, and that continues to work. There continues to be work to do that as well. But they have concentrated, to be fair, on the high volume areas. So it's been very much focused around housing repairs, council tax and benefit inquiries. And that has reduced some of the volume on the teams so that they can deal with some of the more complex issues that are coming forward at the moment. But absolutely more than happy to look at that going forward and include that in our plans. And thank you for raising it, Councillor.
Councillor, have you got a supplementary question? Thank you, Councillor.
To raise the issue for questions 11, 12 and 13. The wording might be about people who've entered the country illegally, but given that he's referring to Dewsbury and planned placements, he's referring to asylum seekers. And in fact, any placement of asylum seekers is nothing whatsoever to do with the council. It's to do with the Home Office, as he should well know. And I just think that these next three questions should not be put.
Yeah.
Just to clarify that the questions were.
Can we have one person talking out of time, please? Thank you.
Councillor Warner, I know what your comments. A decision was taken that they were questions that were relevant to powers and duties of the council and could be put, but perhaps the responses may take into account the point that you've said. So I think, Councillor, we're back to the meeting.
Yeah, Councillor Lukic, question.
Yeah, thank you, and take Councillor Warner's point on board. I've heard it. Councillor Pandor, will you please provide details of any proposals or suggestions that any members of your administration might have been aware of for accommodation to be provided within Dewsbury Town Centre for people who've entered the country illegally?
Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Councillor Lucic. Mr. Mayor, I will pass this question on to the Cabinet Portfolio Holder, Councillor Carol Patterson. Carol Patterson, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Lucic, you've just sort of clarified exactly what you were asking in your question, because you, as portfolio holder for learning, you will forgive me for sort of not quite understanding what your question was about. But in speaking it, you've put the two commas in that should have been in the written question. And I understand it a little bit better, thank you. But my answer to that is no, I can't. And I'm not quite sure why you're implying that anybody should be able to. And just to pick up the point that Councillor Warner made, people who have entered the country illegally, if you are referring to asylum seekers do not enter the country illegally.
Councillor Lukic, have you got a supplementary question?
No, it's a factual confirmation, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Question 12, Councillor Lukic to the Cabinet Member for Region, Councillor Turner.
Thanks again, Mr Mayor. Councillor Turner, in your position of responsibility over planning, is our planning service properly prepared to stop any potential changes of use of buildings in breach of planning control, to provide accommodation for people who've entered the country illegally, and for clarification that can count under various sections of Immigration Acts? Thank you.
Councillor Turner.
Mr Mayor, thank you. Councillor Lukic, thank you for your question. So it's important to understand the role of planning and planning enforcement. The local planning authority's compliance team are available to investigate any alleged breaches of planning control and will take action to any related to planning matters. Only actual breaches of planning control can be tackled through the planning system. Planning enforcement can only be considered where the building work or material change of use being undertaken requires planning permission. An initial investigation by the Planning Enforcement Office will seek to determine this. It is not a planning function to determine who and where people should be living or residing in residential properties with the appropriate permissions.
Councillor Lukic, have you got a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you. In my question, I'm referring, I suppose, to cases observed in other authorities of buildings, with hotels and things like that, where they have changed use through placements under the Immigration Acts with outside planning control, which local authorities have then struggled to manage. So I was just looking for a specific confirmation if, for example, our planning enforcement team are aware of such cases and whether that's incorporated into their procedures.
Councillor Turner.
Councillor Lukic, thank you. I can't comment on what's happening in other local authorities. You'll appreciate. If you're aware of any breaches of planning enforcement, please report to the enforcement team and they will investigate it. But as I said earlier, just because if you've got planning permission for a building, it doesn't compel you to who can live there. People can live there, and whether they're asylum seekers or not, they have the right to live there. Planning enforcement does not specify who lives there.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Question 14, Councillor Munro. Sorry, I do apologise. Thank you, Councillor Bolt, for highlighting that. Question 13, Councillor Lukic to Councillor Firth, but Councillor Firth is not here at the moment. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Yes, my last one. Thanks for bearing with me. In your position, I was going to ask Councillor Firth, in his position of responsibility for Dewsbury Town Centre regeneration, do you consider that the town centre is an appropriate location for accommodation to be provided for people who've entered the country illegally?
Councillor Turner.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Lukic, I'm answering on this behalf of Councillor Firth, who's left the meeting for personal reasons. So we are not aware of any accommodation to be provided for people who enter the country illegally to be provided at Dewsbury Town Centre. If this refers to asylum seekers accommodation, under current Home Office policy, any areas of Kirklees and nationally can be considered and utilised by a Home Office contracted asylum accommodation provider. Currently, this is MEAS, to provide accommodation for housing asylum seekers. The Home Office will essentially notify local authorities that MEAS are considering utilising accommodation in our area. We provide multi-agency feedback on proposed sites and the Home Office then make a decision.
Councillor Lukic, have you got a supplementary question?
Yes, please. Just focusing specifically on the Cabinet's view about Dewsbury Town Centre as an appropriate location, can that be clarified, please?
Councillor Turner.
I'm sorry, I'm not available to speak on behalf of the Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Question 14, question from Councillor Munro to Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This question is similar to that was asked by my colleague earlier, so I'll still ask it. So recently, Arriva announced cuts to bus services across Kirklees, including the 231 and 232, which serve Lepton, which is part of the Almonbury ward. What is the council doing about these cuts?
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Moreau, for your question. First of all, I think everybody here knows and feels the frustration that your residents will have where there are cuts to bus routes. And where there are cuts to services, where they've gone ahead, the bus operators have largely blamed driver availability. West Yorkshire Combined Authority and district partners have been working for the industry using the devolved adult education budget to fund training for new bus drivers. A bus driver recruitment campaign is underway to attract new drivers, and West Yorkshire Combined Authority and district partners are pushing hard for services to be restored as soon as possible.
Do you have a supplementary question, Councillor Munro?
Yeah, I have a supplementary, Mr Mayor, thank you. So, thank you for that, Councillor Butt. However, I understand Arriva are expected to soak up the cost of extra resources, which is largely due to poor planning of roadworks across Kirklees. These are factors which are within the control of this council. So when will this council take control and manage the roadworks in collaboration with bus service providers? Thank you.
Councillor Butt.
Supplementary question. I'm more than happy for you to get in contact via email with that, and I can get an answer for you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Question 15 from Councillor McGuinn to Cabinet Member for Housing, Councillor Scott.
Hi, Kathy. Can the Cabinet Member for Housing explain why the flats in Lepton are still not had their porches repaired after I was promised they would be done by February?
Councillor Scott.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor McGuinn. First and foremost, I think it needs to be noted in this chamber, this is not the arena to bring these queries to. We actually have a set-up council inquiry where you can actually go direct, and I have been privy to this case, Councillor McGuinn, because you have contacted me before. I equally have asked for them answers and had either no response or some responses and dates. But unfortunately, in the times that we're in, we're finding it extremely difficult to get contractors. But I do believe that the actual service has been in contact to say, you know, that we are trying to get contractors to honour what we said we'd do. So as of tonight, I will take it back again. I will ensure that you are contacted and given a response on some kind of lead time. But can I just make it clear, what is happening is despite you bringing it to full council, residents are kept up to date by the estate managers, and they are also lettered. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor McGuinn, have you got a supplementary question?
To note that I think we can both agree that it's a blot on the landscape, what's happening in Lepton, and if it can be done as quickly as possible. It's been going on for 2 years, this issue. Okay? Can it be sorted out really quickly, please?
Earlier, officers are aware, and we are working to try and secure a contractor. So in this moment in time, we have another contractor working on something. We're trying to tie them in to do this work at the Lepton Flats. And I've offered before, and many times, to come out and reassure residents. And I know that officers have actually gone out and reassured residents, but we're in the hands of contractors. Please bear with us. Tonight I will make sure that an email goes off to ensure that you're kept in the loop, because I did check and you have been given emails despite the length of time, but it did take you some time before you approached me as a portfolio holder. But can I just again encourage members, any problems that you have, please put it through councillor inquiries. I'm the last port to call if you don't get a response from that.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Question 16 from Councillor McGuinn to Cabinet Member for Region, Councillor Turner.
Can the Cabinet Member for Economic Regeneration tell me if the Council supports planning applications that do not want Section 106 payments or affordable housing as part of their conditions for approving building.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Councillor McGuinn. No, of course not. However, the planning system does allow for applicants who have concerns about the viability of developments to present evidence in the planning application to explain and justify why planning obligations cannot be met. The Council has a robust and well-established system for seeking external professional surveyors to assess any applications where requests on viability grounds for not providing planning obligations are submitted. The outcome of any viability appraisal exercise is always discussed in public with the relevant planning committee before they make their decision on a planning application. It is up to the planning committee to decide if they think the evidence and material planning considerations justifies granting permission or not. Having spent 9 years on planning committees, I can personally say that I have seen many viability reports and know that the process is robust and does weed out those that are trying to avoid their obligations, of which there are some. But does also support those applicants that can't make an application work due to the abnormal circumstances, and that's the right thing to do, as we need to encourage development of sites that are difficult and tricky to help meet our housing targets, and to ensure that we don't just use up all the easy sites and put extra pressure on the green belt in future years.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
I was going to say. Yeah. The Section 106 payments and affordable housing are important elements in planning. I think we can all agree on that. Do you think there was some land put in the local plan for building that shouldn't have been there because it's not viable?
Councillor Turner.
The land that was put in the local plan was assessed as a desktop exercise in many cases, and the only way you find out if it's viable is when you actually go on site and start doing some either digging or exploring and checking gradients, etc. So to say that the wrong sites is not actually correct. There were sites that were put in there that potentially have housing, but until you actually go on site and you do some excavations, check if there's any undermining or not, you cannot say that they are not viable. Plus the fact is, as housing costs increase, the cost of houses increase, they may become more viable because the cost of doing it will be offset by the increase in the cost of houses.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Question 17, Councillor Hall to Cabinet Member for Health and Social Care, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What action can or will you take against care providers who are not carrying out their duties satisfactorily?
Councillor Khan.
Mr Mayor, can I take this opportunity to remind this chamber that all councillors have a duty of care to report any safeguarding issues and seek advice if they know or suspect any vulnerable person is at risk of harm or not receiving the care that they need. Councillor Hall, I sincerely hope you haven't left a vulnerable person in an unsatisfactory position while waiting to raise this question in this meeting. And I wish I could thank you for this question because I can't, because I don't quite understand it in terms of what action can or will you take against a care provider, because it really depends on circumstances. And like I said, if it's a serious risk, then that's a job for immediate safeguarding. But what I will do, I'll give you a really brief overview of arrangements. Now, by law, every health and care provider has to have a complaints system in place. Care providers are registered, regulated, and enforcement action is taken by the Care Quality Commission. Okay, the contracts the council has with care providers are monitored, and where defaults are identified, default notices will be issued and followed up to ensure compliance. This may result in placements being suspended pending improvements. Providers are offered and directed with help and support from the council within this process. And whilst the availability of home care in Kirklees is better than it is than many other local authorities because of the investments that we've made in the sector. There are still occasions when the consistency or reliability of the times that they can provide care is compromised because of staff shortages, and that's linked to the national issue around labour shortage.
Councillor Hall, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you. I'm sure we're all well aware about what we should do in terms of safeguarding. My problem with this really is that I'm sure we've all come across instances before where we think that a care provider is not giving the service that they should. For instance, somebody that's visiting for 10 minutes, they should be there for half an hour. And these will be raised. And as Kirklees Council, we're often either the brokers or the commissioners of that service. So, I mean, not only, first and foremost, are those vulnerable people not getting the service they deserve, but secondly, either we or the people that are paying for it are not getting value for money either. So it's a double whammy, really. So could I ask, how do you know, personally, that we are getting value for money from the care providers that we are either commissioning or broking?
Councillor Khan.
Complaint systems, there are flags within there that will be picked up on. I mean, obviously that's one way. And during the pandemic, we maintained that monitoring of the services that have contract agreements with us. And that was then via video calls and by checking in with relatives and checking in with people who use those services. And of course, that continual monitoring is undertaken. And when there are problems, we work with them to address them, to ensure that they comply. In more serious cases, there is a different procedure where, you know, improvements aren't being made, and I can share the details of that if you give me 1 second. So the council contract department, they've got the authority to stop placements, and worst case, we could terminate the whole contract. We don't enact as a general rule. We do try and work with providers to rectify areas of concern. Ultimately, CQC are the regulatory body who will formally issue warning notices. If no improvements evidence, then this can escalate to a notice of decision, which could mean care home closure. But there are legal processes throughout this.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Question 18, Councillor Hall to Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question is, what is now the average time to determine a minor planning application in Kirklees?
Councillor Turner.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Councillor Hall, thank you. The honest answer is we don't record average times for applications, as the government does not request this measure from councils, so we don't record it. The government rate planning performance on the number of decisions made within time limits. I do have the figures for the last few years of our performance as a LPA against the national targets for determining all planning applications. So the target for the government for minor apps is 70%. So 2018, sorry, this is a bit boring, but there you go. 2018-2019 was 93.7%. 1920 was 96.17%. 2021, 93.12%. And as of this year, April to August, we are currently running at 81%. Major apps have to be agreed within 13 weeks or agreed timescales, and the target for that is 60%. And currently this year, we're running at 92.8%. Last year, we achieved 100% of that target. So other apps, applications have to be decided within 8 weeks or agreed timescales. We're currently running at 90.4%, and again, against the government target of 7%. And whilst we have slipped from previous years, we are well within the target set by the government. And I do understand the frustration of developers and residents at what sometimes can seem to be slow progress. But as we know, sometimes applications can be delayed for many reasons, But I can assure everyone that officers are working really hard to get the applications process as quickly as possible and to ensure that the right decisions are reached at the end of that process.
Councillor Hall, do you have a supplementary question?
To thank Councillor Turner for that answer. It doesn't chime with my experience in my ward, which is that it's taken an inordinate amount of time to get through planning applications at the moment. And I know I have raised this with Councillor Turner before, and he has been good enough to reply to me with these reasons. But something came to light the other day, which we were told that the planning office acknowledged that there were problems getting planning applications through, and they would be shifting staff from minor applications onto the major applications to try and unblock the blockage, as it were. And I want to know whether you think that's a good idea. I don't think it is, because I think we should get the minor applications got through first. And the reason for that is that I've got small building firms, you know, 2, 3, 4 men in my ward who are just waiting for the work and having to even lay people off because the work is not there. They were expecting planning applications to be done. And so I just raise an eyebrow about that. Would he go back to the planning office and reconsider whether that's actually the right way to proceed?
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Obviously, moving officers around is an operational matter, not for myself. But as it happens, I have a meeting next week, already penciled in with senior planning officers, to look at how we move the planning system forward within Kirklees. So those discussions have started briefly a couple of weeks ago, and we'll have a further discussion next week. As you know, there are many reasons plans can get slowed down, and it's not just the planning system at this end. We can get poor applications. Sometimes we can't get the information from the external bodies who've got the same problems as everybody else with lack of staff. So that can slow the. So there's a multitude of reasons why it gets slowed down. And I, like you, get frustrated because I want to see people here. I want to see businesses building. I want to see homes because people are waiting lists as long as my arm for people for houses. So I want to get them built, get those businesses moving into Kirklees. Kirklees is open for business. We want those people here. So as I said, we are looking at ways of trying to speed the process up, and that process will start in serious earnest next week.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Question 19, Councillor Hall to Cabinet Member, Councillor Paul Davis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What's the target for asset and land disposals this year, and are we going to meet it?
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. There is no specific target for asset and land disposals for 2022-23 at this present time.
Councillor Hall, do you have a supplementary question?
As always, the first question is the way to get to the second question, but I do thank you for your answer. And that is, I'm concerned that I'm not going to get very far with this one either, that I have a piece of land in my ward, which is council-owned land. It's an absolute target for antisocial behaviour. It's had burnt-out cars on it, caravans, you name it. It's not used for anything at all. It's ripe for development. We could even put council houses on it or whatever you want to do, but I don't like it as it is, and I've been on to estates for probably 3 years. I'm trying to get them to shift it. I've even found someone who is willing to buy it to put some houses on it. So to me, it should be one of these we can get done quick. And I wondered whether you can get somebody to just have a look at it and get me an answer, please.
Councillor Davis.
All that preparation I did for the supplementary was completely a waste of time, wasn't it? I'd be more than happy, Councillor Hall. If you send me the details, we'll certainly look at that. And currently, we are going through reviews of all of our assets, so that information will be very useful, in fact. So, yeah, more than happy to do that.
Councillor Pando.
Out for a minute there, Mr. This is to the leader. How many officer vacancies have we, and what is this as a proportion of our workforce?
Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Councillor David Hall. What I'll do is I'll ask my Cabinet Member, Councillor Paul Davis, who is responsible for human resources, to answer this question. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, in terms of the actual figure, we have 445 posts currently vacant. That represents 4.54% of our workforce. And obviously, you'll understand, and we've discussed it at the Personnel Committee many times, there are multiple reasons around these vacancies. A number of my staff promoted, moved, and changes within organisations. And clearly at the moment, I think as most of us know, we're working hard to attract the right candidates and to retain staff. So that's where we sit at the moment in terms of the actual numbers, Councillor Hall.
Councillor Hall, do you have a supplementary question?
That scale of vacancies, as you've said, I mean, it's not really sustainable. I'm glad to hear that you've got it on your target. And I'd like to know some more about how we are tackling it. Because some of the things that have been raised tonight, particularly my frustrations, which I'm sorry I've vented tonight in several places, I'm convinced that a lot of it is to do with the fact that we haven't got the people doing the jobs. That we've got the post, we want to spend the money, we want to do the job, but we just don't have the people there. And to me, that's one of the biggest issues that we face at the moment. Because what we're finding is that practically every service I go to, I can't get a response. I think other members are finding the same thing. You know, as a member for 18 years, I do think that I've got some wherewithal to know how the place works, and I've made contacts with officers all that time. I still can't get things done. So please, can we make sure that this is a priority to try and fill some of these posts? And I think we've got to be very imaginative and flexible as to how we do it.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Thank you for that. Sorry, Councillor Davis, I forgot about you.
Briefly, absolutely agree. Only last week, I don't know if you're aware, other members, we had a fantastic event in the Brian Jackson building on Friday, which is our first recruitment fair that we've done for a long time. We've been talking about doing this, certainly on the Personnel Committee. We've got another one organised, I believe it's in Dewsbury as well. What we're trying to do is get out there and actually talk to people. There's so many barriers that people, think, myths that you can only join the council if you know somebody and all that sort of nonsense. I'm breaking down some of those, but also some very pragmatic things, simple things like our application process, our application forms. We're looking at ways of helping people to do that and break through some of those barriers. So absolutely agree with you. We'll continue to look at more innovative ways as well. But I can assure you this is a priority, and the personnel team are working on it. By the way, one thing I will say, our services were there last Friday, and it was fantastic to see some of our directors and their staff out there talking to members of the public, and the enthusiasm we received from everyone was fantastic. In fact, when they opened the event, there was a line around the building, a queue to come in there. So your point is well made. And I know on the Personnel Committee we get great cross-party support for this as well. But yeah, it is a priority.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Item 12 on the agenda. We've now finished the item. 12 minutes, page 109, minutes of the meeting of the Cabinet and Cabinet Committee local issues are here for information to know. Item 13, holding the executive to account for Part A. So let me finish. Sorry. Just for, no, it wasn't for,
Yes.
it's just for information.
No, you can ask a question.
You can't. It's just for information.
Just for information.
Yeah.
Yes. Can do.
Well, just for information anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to know?
No, just for information, noted.
I'm going to take questions up to you. If he's got questions.
Have you got a question, Councillor? You got comments to make or a question?
On item 12.
Okay. No, that's fine. Go on. I'll let him, yeah.
Change what we're doing. Won't be long.
For everybody else now.
Just comments on Cabinet meeting. On the 5th of July, as we're encouraged to do, I went to a Cabinet meeting to ask a question about highways maintenance. And I'm glad that I think it's Andrea or Lee, when they were making notes, have politely put the leader of the council made a response. It was successful because within a week of that, all of us had a briefing on how we deal with unclassified roads. Within a fortnight, I'd had a briefing from the new Service Director of Highways about the potential for a new plan. Just to set a bit of context on this, I've been trying to do my bit by riding my bike for the last 12 months. I've done about 1,500 miles. I know a few of you think I'm a bit mad about doing that. I feel fairly confident as a cyclist. My biggest concern is about dodging potholes and poor reinstatements. And my perception over the last 12 months is that's got worse. My main journey is from Goka through to Marsden, where I work, and then up to Meltham. And some of those roads, you don't feel safe. What I've managed to find out is that, and I asked the question very carefully about the money, because we're always told there's not enough money to do the job properly, and I know that. And I think that should be a concern for all of us as local councillors seeking to rep whatever party we're on. As I understand it, I'm just focusing on vehicle excise duty. £6.6 billion worth of vehicle excise duties collected every year. Well, it was in 2021-22. If that was given out pro rata for Kirklees, we should have about £36 million to spend on maintain our roads. That's just vehicle excise duty. That's not all the duties collected to do with cars. On the relevant year, Kirklees spent £22 million on doing up its roads. And then some of us who received the briefing were really concerned to know that at the current rate of repair, that for our unclassified roads, it's going to take over 100 years to get that sorted out. And I think all of us ought to be advocating to our political parties, through local government association, to actually make sure that there is adequate funding coming in to local authorities to repair the roads. So that is my comment, and that's the general non-political comment. It's a political comment, but not party political, because we always have. All of us are putting more money into the budget every year to try and assure our residents we're doing the thing, but it's not enough. So I think there needs to be a degree of advocacy going on, and central government needs to provide us with the right amount of money. As regards the plan, this is the key issue. And when I met the service director about this and was presented with that, I thought, well, that's a good plan. And it needs to be. I'm not sure that we all know about that yet, and I'm not sure that we were aware of when that was at Cabinet. But one of the issues is about reinstatements. And I understand the service director who came from Wakefield, there's a lot of work done in Wakefield about making sure that utilities repair the roads as they should do, and if they don't, they could be issued with a fixed penalty notice. And actually, as I understand in Wakefield, actually that job is self-funding. Now, our group, in the budget in February, presented part of our budget program was actually get more people to do exactly that sort of thing. And I would hope that the administration, as part of its budget submissions for next February, will be looking to expand highways officers with a specific remit of checking reinstatements and making sure that the job's done properly. Because that's what utilities are supposed to do. I know Councillor Bolt at the RAS, it doesn't have to be a billet table, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we know as ward councillors, as pedestrians and as road users, that some of these reinstatements are not adequate. And that is what needs to happen. And it's not about the small amount of resource for this council would actually deliver massive benefits for our residents, because it's not our money to do the reinstatement, it's theirs, it's doing the job properly. So I'm looking forward to the plan that I was shown in draft coming forward back through Cabinet and shown to all of us in the council. I think it's a good plan, but also it's this advocacy to make sure there's a matter, because it's about infrastructure for our residents. And the most disappointing thing, and it's not just roads, it's about pavements, because I've received a phone call from one of my residents who'd fallen, who was quite seriously injured. It just needs sorting out somehow. So I just wanted to make that comment based on my question at Cabinet. There was some good came out of it, but it is this issue about using the small amount of our resource to make sure that other people get the job done properly. And then all of us will feel a bit safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Is there any more questions on item 12? Because I've got a list here of names. Are they all for that? Okay, now just checking, Councillor Bolt. Just making sure.
Yeah.
Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to the leader on item 12. Do you think that the minutes that we're presented with tonight are an accurate, complete and fulsome record which will allow residents to understand the issues and provide a useful historic document?
Yes, Councillor Pando, yeah.
The way the minutes have been written as far as I can remember. So as far as I can see, Mr. Mayor, I can't see any problem with the minutes because they are written professionally. They record all the decisions we make, and they are also opportunities for members to come to meetings if they feel that the minutes have not been recorded correctly. You know, both his party and other parties have been in administration for previous years. So as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Mayor, the minutes are recorded professionally and correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pando. Councillor Bolt. It's
up to you.
Well, let him get on with it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As someone once said, it's a response, not an answer. Again, I asked you if you thought they were accurate, complete and fulsome, waffling about what other people have done. Well, okay then. So you think they're accurate, complete and fulsome. So on page 126 of the minutes, a question from Councillor Taylor in detail asks about the work of the Democracy Commission. In particular, there is a question, and it says, in terms of cost of living, there is potentially a role for town and parish councils as well ourselves. The complete, fulsome and accurate record says a response was provided by the leader of the council. How on earth are residents supposed to know what your view was, what your response was, and that is replicated? Sorry? If you need to phone a friend or ask the audience, I'm sure Councillor Mather will assist.
Councillor Bolt.
But Mr. Mayor, can we have,
stick to that.
Whilst recording in a fulsome, accurate and wholesome manner the questions, isn't it right that the residents and people who come back in history, when you look at the archives, get to know the words of the leader, not a response was provided by the leader? Because that, Mr. Mayor, says nothing to no one.
Councillor Pando.
Mr. Mayor, I'm so disappointed, right, in Councillor Bolt's responses to these minutes. Every single minute is not just recorded on these papers, but they're recorded on webcasts. They're archived. And I know that he might not be in a position to actually sort of acknowledge the full picture, but I just can't see why he's wasting council time. The minutes are recorded. Every single word I say is recorded and archived, and it's safe for anyone to see. So what don't you understand with that, Martin? It's recorded. It's on video. Video. God.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor.
You want him to talk?
A point of personal explanation allows a person to rise if a speaker has misunderstood him. And clearly, from the response of the leader, he's misunderstood. Clearly, from the response of the leader, he's not being inclusive. By saying to people that you must look at the webcast goes against the whole inclusivity strategy. What about the residents who don't have? Are you going to give everybody an iPad so they can look at your words on the internet?
Councillor Bolt, Councillor Bolt, Councillor Pandas, answer the question. Can we move on? Thank you. Item. Sorry, God. There is nobody else. Okay. Item 13, holding the executive to account for Part A of this item. Council will receive a portfolio update from the Cabinet member. Can we have one? Here's my question. Thank you. Item 13, holding the executive to account for Part A of this item. Council will receive a portfolio update from Cabinet Member for Children's Services. Oral questions, comments to Cabinet members on their portfolios and on Cabinet minutes will be Part B. A, Cabinet portfolio update. Can I now invite Councillor Hendrick to present the update? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm so excited by this because this is my 4th attempt to do this presentation, and I have been given this. It looks like a small handheld razor, but I'm told it works the screen there. So there's the title. I'm working on the premise that everybody in this chamber can read, so I'm not going to read things out for you, apart from my name's Viv Kendrick. Okay. So this is about our approach to improvement. The first one is fairly easy to understand, isn't it? Would we accept it for our child? Does it need to be better? Those are the questions around there. The second one, committed corporate parents, and this is what I want to really talk to you all about. It's not just Children's Services' role to be corporate parent. It's not just the corporate parenting board. It's not just those members who sit on children's scrutiny, and God bless them for their help. It's not just those members who sit on fostering and adoption panels, but all councillors in this chamber. Corporate parents are also all the services in this council, and we do have strategic directors come to corporate parenting board to tell us what their services can do to support the work that we're trying to do. It's also our partners in education, the police, health, the voluntary sector and so on, and arm's length organisations like Kirklees Active Leisure. There's the old saying, isn't it? It takes a village to raise a child. In this case, it takes this wider community of Kirklees to raise our children, and we all have a part to play. And to help councillors, because I know some councillors who aren't involved in those children's things will say, what is it I'm meant to do? And I quite understand that. So tomorrow, you will all receive an email. And in that email will be a link. So if somebody says, oh, I wondered about fostering, there'll be a link that you can give them details as to how they can look at and find out more about it. It'll also give you a link, and it's a bit short notice this, but on Saturday at the Ukrainian Club is an event about getting to know about fostering. Anybody can go, children are welcome, you even get a bit of lunch from 11 till 1, but the details are there. The team would really welcome people letting them know if they can that they're going, but hey, anybody who goes would be welcome. And the other thing that's in this email is about the independent visitor scheme. And a lot of people don't know about this. Children who are looked after have the opportunity and the offer of having what's called an independent visitor, and that's a volunteer, somebody who might spend a bit of time having a chat, going for a coffee, kicking a football about, even going to the real football match, Councillor Turner. Going shopping, anything, and young people say to me how much they value it because it's not with the other children who are in the care home they're in perhaps, it's not with their foster carers, it's not with the social worker, it's just something that is there and is so valued. So anybody who's got a bit of spare time, but think about people who are perhaps retiring from the authority, people who you know are retired who might well welcome being involved in that. The link will be on this email as to how people get in touch and do that. And it's an absolutely valuable thing. I think off the top of my head, we've about 27 children and young people who are waiting to be matched with an independent visitor. So that's really, really important. The other thing I'd like you all to think about while I untangle my glasses from this tassel is about conversations, people you know in the community, or conversations you start off sometimes, because we all go out and meet people who might be able to offer a Saturday job to a child or young person in care or a care leaver, who might be able to offer some training or some work experience, absolutely essential to these young people. You know, moving on to who could offer an apprenticeship, that would be wonderful, or even an actual job. But those conversations are really important, and you must always know somebody when you're in your local, I don't know, fish and chip shop or another shop or a business that you talk to, who can offer an opportunity for our children and young people to get some experience. So, back to the screen, folks. Child-focused. That's central to everything we do. I think that's fairly explanatory. And knowing the difference we're making, and that's not just about looking at data, it's about looking at outcomes, isn't it? About real world, real time, and the experience that our children and young people have and tell us about. And then preparing for an inspection, local authority children's services. So that is ILACs, inspecting local authority children's services. It's an Ofsted framework. It looks at how we help and protect children, the experience and progress of children that were looked after, arrangements for permanence that includes adoption, and the experience and progress of care leavers. But one of the other things that Ofsted will look at when we have this next inspection is they will evaluate the effectiveness of leaders as well as managers, and that means all of us. How effective are we at looking after our children? And it's also obviously about the impact we have on children and young people's lives and the quality of professional practice. And then the bottom bit, our ambition to be outstanding, that's what I'm seeking. That's what everybody I talk to in children's services is seeking. Not to be good, we want to be outstanding. I'll be desperately disappointed if we don't get there, and I expect to. What was the improvement board is now the ambition board. I'm going to try and do the magic. Oh, there we are. So here we are. Here's a bit of history I think you all basically know, but there we are. 2016, the year of absolute despair, when we were found to be not absolutely inadequate as children's services. Absolutely desperate time, and I know it worried everybody who was a councillor at that time. Since then, between 2017 and 2019, we were lucky enough to have a partnership with Leeds Council, and some very experienced practitioners came and worked with us, and thank goodness some of them have stayed with us, and what a benefit that has been. Really, absolutely has. And we also got a children's commissioner, Eleanor Brazil, and it was a bit like, I don't know what Jackie felt, but I always felt I was going to the headmistress's study. She used to terrify me. And actually, I found her one of the greatest supports, the best advisors one could ever have asked for, and that was absolutely brilliant. I felt panicky when she said, right, my time's up, I'm going. I'm going, oh, my goodness. But we sort of consolidated the leadership. You can see some of the comments from Ofsted. And we had a 10-point improvement plan, which strangely has a quote from me there as such. Has that moved? It has. There have been so many inspections, it's really hard to know where I am on these screens. So in 2019, we had an Ofsted inspection. I looked hopefully at the verbal feedback, waiting for the chief inspector to say good, and she said requires improvement, and I was desperately disappointed. She was right, but, you know, I wanted more. In 2020, the Undersecretary of State removed our improvement notice, and, you know, what's quoted there helps me have some confidence that we're going in the right direction. And in 2021, we had a focus visit and some really good comments there, and that was looking at our front door. Our front door, the bit where referrals come into a team of a wide range of partners, sit and look at, discuss and decide what we're going to do with them. And they were saying, my God, your front door's good. That was such a heartwarming moment. And then, because we didn't have enough inspections, we invited a peer review. This was before Ofsted had looked at our front door, and they were also impressed by it. So, you know, this was a team of lead members for Children's Services and directors of Children's Services and other people with expertise. You know, so it's always reassuring. I need feedback loops all the time. In 2021, we had a focus visit, and, you know, it was gratifying that in spite of COVID, they felt that we were doing a pretty reasonable job. And then in December, every year there's an annual conversation with Ofsted. I'm sure Mel Meggs looks forward to it with absolute excitement just before Christmas. But, you know, there again, you know, somebody said there is no waiting list for families to be allocated to family support is a really, really strong thing. And then we keep on with inspections. We had the special educational needs inspection in February. All the things that we knew that needed resolving, improving, were the things they highlighted. And we're in the transformation plan, no surprise. But there's a quote from PCAN, Parents of Children with Additional Needs. When I started with Children's Services, I went to a PCAN meeting, and I wish I'd taken a tin hat, because they didn't think we were a lovely bunch. They are some of our greatest supporters because of the co-work we've done together, and because they are experts by experience, and we're listening and helping move things on. And then we had what's referred to as a JTI, Joint Targeted Area Inspection, and that's looking across everything, the police and health and so on, about safeguarding. And again, they were incredibly complimentary about our youth engagement service. So all those things give me great hope. So there we are, a lot of investment from this council. I defy anybody to tell me I can't have the money if we really need it. I'll get very aggressive. But we have no agency workers. No agency workers. When I started, we had 70. Cost a fortune. No agency workers. Good staff stability. And the average caseload, it's 17.4 there. I looked a couple of months back, it was 16.2, and it just wobbles about a bit because, you know, where there's a need, we have to address it. But, I mean, one of the greatest things is for a while we've been growing our own social workers. Getting experienced social workers is about trying to get hen's teeth. It really is difficult. So for quite a long time now, we've been going to students who are doing the social work course, and as they leave, they can't be a social worker. They're students, if you like.
Councillor Kendrick, do you want to speed up a bit, please?
Yeah, I'll try. I'm nearly there, Mr. Mayor. I'm nearly there. We have 8 frontline students who started last month from university. That makes a total of 23 in total who are in development. That will be 23 social workers. How good is that? We've got the second Mockingbird programme starting. I won't explain it. You'll have to ask me another time. And much more joined-up work with partners, foster carers, care leavers and so on in looking at our policies and procedures. We've got about just over 600 children, young people who are looked after. Neighbouring authorities and our statistical neighbours have usually about 1,000. That might be a cause for concern, but we work so much with early intervention that's meant some children come into care. It's also meant that we've also worked to help children stay with wider family, with special guardianship orders, kinship carers, and that's really, really important. Do I think everything's resolved? No, I don't. Our SENT transformation plan is still going on. We need improvements, things like adoption. We face increased demand and pressures, but I can't do it without the dedicated professionals we have. But I can't do it unless all of you play your part. So really, really think about how you can do something to help us become outstanding as a children's services. And I'll just quickly give a gold tick to Councillor Cooper and Councillor Turner, because they had a very interesting discussion at Cabinet yesterday about the George Hotel and the fact we have catering at Kirklees College, and is there some social value there to get those young people involved. It now needs to be delivered, folks. That's the challenge. I'll stop now, Mr. Mayor, but I do ask you all to look very carefully for the email tomorrow, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Kendrick. Part A is now complete. We'll now move to Part B, oral questions to Cabinet members on their portfolios on Cabinet minutes. Sorry. Councillor Richard Smith.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether this is appropriate or not, but I was kind of wanting to speak on the presentation that's just been given. So can I phrase that as a question to Councillor Kendrick? I mean, often in this chamber, you'll see me be quite critical of the administration, and we have different views, obviously, the nature of politics, which is healthy, and we should continue to be adversarial where we disagree. But I do have to say I would like to support more or less everything that Councillor Kendrick has said. I'm trying to pick out a couple of salient points. The most obvious would be where we came from in 2016 to where we are today. The fact that we are all corporate parents, and we need to recognise that is a real responsibility on us all. I speak from a position of actually interacting with a lot of these boards. I sit on the Corporate Parenting Board and the Children's Scrutiny Panel. I've been on an adoption panel for a couple of years as well. And I'm a dad, I've got a couple of kids, and I understand what it's like to see kids who've not had the best start in life. Thankfully not my own, but you know, you see kids at school who my kids interact with, and it's obvious. So there's a lot to be said about this policy. And Councillor Kendrick does get it, so I'm really happy with what I've just listened to. Fostering is a huge part of supporting kids who are in a vulnerable position. We don't have enough fosterers. There is clearly a need to keep pushing that. And if I get time to go along on Saturday, I will, but I'm not sure I'll have time. But we do need to keep banging the drum about this as councillors, as corporate parents, because there is so many important reasons for this. The independent visitor, again, it's something, if I had a bit of time, I'd do it myself, and I'd like to do stuff like that a little bit more if time was allowing. But being child-focused, you know, you mentioned the ambition and the Ofsted history. There's so much in here that resonates with what we should be doing as an authority. And how much things have got better. Leeds Council was a godsend to this authority because it was a mess, and Eleanor Brazil was fantastic, there's no doubt about that. But we've also been fortunate, we've got some good staff in the Children's Services Department, and to be fair, we've got a good Cabinet member. And I think we recognise that, you know, no, I'm being fair, because if this was all about just pulling each other to bits and arguing, there wouldn't be any point in standing here as a councillor. You need to work together. And I think, to be honest with you, the children's services should be one of those areas that is a little bit ring-fenced from politics. We can all moan and whinge about our views on the world and what's right and wrong with X, Y, and Z. But when it comes to this, it's so important that we do try and pull together. And we have to recognise that we don't live in a perfect world. Somebody may say, you know, one strategy being right or wrong. But I think one of the things that I really would like to emphasise is the cost element. You put a slide up about investment, and it's such a long list of things here that doesn't do its justice in that slide, because what you're not seeing, what you're not recognising, apart from the obvious stuff that I don't need to spell out, like how important it is that kids have a good start in life, that's so obvious. And, you know, I do get passionate about this because I suppose I'm a soft dad who loves his kids. And I feel really bad for those kids that haven't got that support around them. But when you look at it from a different point of view, just being practical, the youth justice system, the wider criminal justice system, unemployment, so that means benefits being paid to people who don't have proper jobs. You have mental health services, and those things, as well as being traumatic and devastating for people that are involved in those kind of situations, they're also very expensive. You talk about value for money. If you want to talk about money, it's probably a bit crass sometimes in this environment to talk about money, but it has to be said that when you're talking about those investments on there, you're saving an awful lot of money. If you're stopping kids from going down the wrong path, all the things I've just mentioned will not be coming into paid for later on down the line. So I would like to just say, that's not a question. So
Your time's up, Councillor Smith. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Smith. Okay, Councillor Alex Lukic.
Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask Councillor Pandor, who I hope is available to speak on behalf of the Cabinet, what is the Cabinet's view, or your own view as leader, on the appropriateness of using buildings in Dewsbury Town Centre to place people who've made illegal journeys to the UK?
Councillor Pandor.
And I'll see their views. I'll also get advice from our professional officers, because there's a lot of legislation around that. Very clearly, one of the things that came out today was you were confused or showed ignorance around the whole asylum system and refugee system, and you used terminology which Councillor Warner quite rightly pointed out, but I think there's a lot of information to take in, there's a lot of facts to take in, and it's a very emotive subject. You know that. And we need to discuss it properly, because whatever we do, this is not an easy subject. This is a humanitarian subject, and as somebody who actually feels passionately about any human being, yeah, I will do the right thing, and I'm sure my Cabinet will do the right thing as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Councillor Lukic, have you got a supplementary question? Thank you. Okay, well,
I thought you didn't want one.
I was saying,
okay.
right, the microphone's loud now. I was just about to say, I don't think the leader is going to answer the question, so enough said there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, yep, Councillor Pandor.
You missed the point. You know, this is a humanitarian issue, and if you understood what I was saying is, I will do the right thing based on humanitarian values that I hold. And I know that you don't share my values, but please do not politicise an issue which is so emotive that it can lead to something right here that we don't want. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Councillor Andrew Cooper.
I doubt we're housing any illegal immigrants anywhere, actually. So that's just a thought. I note this council is collaborating with the government by putting forward 2 areas for consideration as investment zones. How does Councillor Pandor justify support for investment zones when planning controls will be disregarded, environmental protection is reduced, net zero ambitions are ignored, and the requirement for affordable housing is swept aside? Investment zones are opposed by a wide range of organisations like the Wildlife Trusts, the RSPB and the National Trust. Why is Kirklees supporting this appalling Tory proposal?
Councillor Pandor.
Very good question, Councillor Cooper. And you raised the same question yesterday, or a few days ago, yesterday. Time flies. In this job, right, you don't get a week and days just merge into one. But the question you raised yesterday, and I think that I gave you a response, but I'll just try and repeat what I said. As a leader, you always have a choice. And when you're in the cabinet, you also have a choice. And as far as my view goes, is that the investment zones is a way to kickstart the economy. It's also a way to level up. A lot of the investment that takes place is down south. You know, I'm not saying for 1 minute that we need to actually throw all the rules and regulations, all the lobbies that are putting pressure on us to just ignore that and go roughshod through the planning process. But one thing I will support is where government invites any council, including Kirklees, to put forward their ideas and their plans where we can actually benefit from government funding, then I will not say no. And I think any leader in my position who actually puts communities and regeneration and housing and employment and jobs and skills will do the same thing. These are just initial submissions, Mr. Mayor. All the 5 West Yorkshire leaders have put forward submissions, and I will make sure that I will do whatever I can to bring forward the projects and the plans that we have, which everybody knows about. But there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge. These are just ideas. I don't know what government will come back with in terms of, you know, are we successful or aren't we? But we will be in a competitive environment. The other 5 West Yorkshire authorities are actually punching at the same way as I am. It's not just about West Yorkshire, it's also about East Midlands, it's also about Greater Manchester, it's also about the North East, it's also about the South East, and all the other 11 mayoral combined authorities. But having said that, we will make sure that we are accountable to our public. We also are accountable to the council chamber, and I, for one, will not do anything that contradicts planning policy. Actually, we can't, because the law is the law. We have to make sure we uphold the same standards. So I hope that answers your question, but I know your supplementary will be that are you colluding with the government? It's not colluding with the government at all. It's actually supporting the government who's trying to make sure that we address the cost of living crisis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Panda. Councillor Cooper, do you have a supplementary question?
Which have turned down investment zones because they recognise the issues with them. Now, I've heard what you've said. You've talked about kick-starting the economy, you've talked about levelling up, and you've said that you will not ride roughshod over the planning process. Now, the whole point of investment zones is that they do ride roughshod over the planning process, that they ignore the local plan, that they are not accountable, and that local people are ignored as a result of it. That is the proposal. And there are no benefits that come to this council directly from investment zones. So I ask you again, knowing that, which you should know, why are we even entertaining a scheme like this which will damage our local environment, provide no affordable homes and provide no benefit to the council? Why are you doing it? Why are you supporting the Tories?
Councillor Panda.
I will support any administration nationally, be it my government or even the Greens. They might get in power one day, or coalition government. But on a serious note, Mr. Mayor, you know, we are talking about jobs, we are talking about investment, we are talking about skills, we are talking about infrastructure, and I have not seen anything that actually says that the government will actually break the planning rules and regulations. These are just initial ideas, Mr. Mayor. Can I?
Councillor Cooper, can you let him finish, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
I know Councillor Cooper is very passionate, Mr. Mayor, about how he sees the world. Yeah? And I share a lot of his values. But at the same time, we owe our communities, we owe the great people of Kirklees, we owe the future generations, like we were talking about, and Councillor Smith, to make sure that, you know, we provide a future that they can flourish on. You know, like, I've got 3 kids. Now, every single parent wants their children to have a better life, a better standard of living, and than the previous generations. The way we are at the moment, that possibility is diminishing. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that we create a future that's better for every single child, no matter who they are. And this is part of that, I think, Mr. Mayor. The investment zones are an opportunity. You know, we should be celebrating that the government's actually invited local authorities. If local authorities are not actually embracing this, then, you know, I would be asking them, what is your plan? What is your vision? What is your future? What is your solution to address the cost of living crisis? So there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. There's a lot of detail to work up. But let's see what comes out. Let's see what comes out, and then let's see what the details are, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Panda. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to ask the Leader of the Council a question in the absence of Councillor Firth, if that's okay. At the last full Council, I asked a written question to Councillor Firth, who kindly answered the written question subsequently from the meeting, because we didn't have time to go into detail at the meeting. I got a question answered on the lifespan of the bus station car park in Huddersfield. The background to this question, I just want to very briefly explain. I wanted just to find out how long that car park is likely to be in service for, whether it be 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. I got given a response which was a little bit woolly. It gave me a bit of information that said this is going to be the case over the next 10 to 15 years. There's an ongoing maintenance scheme for that car park to be fulfilled. And my question just to the Leader of the Council is, could you put a bit more meat on the bone and let me know, not today necessarily, but how long is that car park going to be in service for, approximately, whether it be 15, 20 years or just the 15 years? Thank you.
Councillor Panda.
I don't need to let you know today, but what I'll do is I'll let you know at another date, and I'll make sure that Councillor Firth actually lets you know. Thank you.
Councillor Gregg, do you have a supplementary question?
Mr. Mayor, I'm very grateful for the answer from the Leader of the Council. Can I also just ask another question related to that, which is related to the reason I was wanting to find out about the bus station lifespan, which was the Queensgate car park capacity, which is going to be 240 spaces short of what is needed at peak times. Now, that's by Kirklees Council's own highways report on that. What my question is to the Leader of the Council, would you consider maybe bringing that to the fore at maybe a cabinet meeting so that could be really looked at? Because what Kirklees Council's own report is suggesting, that the Huddersfield Town parking strategy is reviewed, and would he consider putting more car parking spaces in that car park when it's built, but prior to that having a full discussion at cabinet? Thank you.
Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a big question, right? Yeah, let me get back to you on that, because I don't have the information to hand to actually give you a response. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pando. Councillor Bilama.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. I have a question for the Cabinet Member Corporate, Councillor Paul Davies. Yesterday, I was delighted to receive a large envelope by Royal Mail from this council. On opening it, I was shocked to find that it contained a letter correctly addressed to me at Civic Centre 3 from a resident of mine regarding an urgent planning query of his. And this letter is dated 22nd of July. Is this a standard of service, 12 weeks between receipt of a letter at Civic Centre 3 and forwarding it to the councillor, which our residents should now expect?
Councillor Paul Davies.
Thanks, Councillor Armour. Certainly it's not the level of service we would aspire to, and I've had letters in the same route as yourself, which certainly there is a delay, but nowhere near that kind of delay. If you send me some of the details, that I will investigate that and get back to you as to why it's happening. But absolutely, that should be far quicker. Though it has to be said, if somebody does write directly to Civic, then it's quite easily a few weeks by the time it processes through and gets out. But should be nowhere near 12 weeks. So apologies on that, and let me know the details, and I'll get you a full explanation.
Councillor Armour, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you. I thank Councillor Davis for his response, and I will take him up on it. Really, I've more of a comment, but I think it's very, very important that this council is open for business, that it's as easy as possible for our residents to contact us. And I really do think that more attention perhaps than was paid does need to be paid in future. It is an important aspect of our work as councillors. So I'll just take that as a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armour. Councillor Lisa Holmes.
It's probably more to Councillor Turner, but it may be to a few of you, I'm not sure. I want to talk about the Gummersall sort of triangle of buildings we've got. We've got the Red House, Gummersall Public Hall and the old First School. So Red House, there are plans in place and I have to say, Councillor Turner, when we got going on that, it was a massive support. Gummersall Public Hall, we've now got a new roof and we believe we've got some life there now. I'm about, and I'm going to invite Councillor Kendrick at some point to come and see us. We're about to launch a youth group there. I'm working with the Leeds charity. We've just committed to 5 years rent and we're about to really give this some welly, for want of a better way of Yorkshire way of putting it. I'm now thinking about the old First School site. I've been speaking to officers. I believe there are surveys and viability studies going on commissioned by West Yorkshire Combined Authority and WSP Cummins, I can't remember. I've asked officers about the reports and whether councillors can have sight of those, and I've been told there may be only opportunity to see summaries for commercial sensitivity. I would be okay with that, but what I'm looking for tonight is some commitment that councillors will be fully involved in all the processes that will now come, selling the site, getting a developer in. I'm particularly keen to see the old Edwardian frontage, the old school building is retained as was advised there should be by the planning inspector when we were doing the local plan. I've seen the state of the inside of it now. It isn't good. There's a lot of lead gone off the roof. I'm aware it's not in a great state, but I need assurance and I'm looking for assurance that we will do everything we can to keep that old Edwardian frontage, because this is a conservation area. We've got these listed buildings straight across from it, and to just have spanking new, really sparkly new houses on that site will really spoil the area. And apart from anything else, that old Edwardian frontage has got some great character about it, and I think we could do something really special with that. So really, it's probably to Councillor Turner and maybe somebody else, but I'd like some assurances on it, please.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Funnily enough, on Monday we had a briefing on, on Tuesday we had a briefing on latest plans for housing and development sites, and that site was one of them we actually discussed. It's very early days yet. There is a lot of work needs to be done to identify what's there. The suggestion maybe possibly mines or something under there and all sorts of things. So that works in its early days. Once that's concluded, that will allow us to decide how to proceed, what happens to it, whether it goes to sell it off to a developer or whether we look to work with the partnership, as we do quite often to develop it ourselves. As I said, work is ongoing, it's early days, and if you want, as and when that information becomes available, I'm more than happy to pass it on to you.
Councillor Holmes, do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, the other thing as well is, will you consider the possibility of splitting the site? Because it may be that there's a developer who would want to do the new part, but it will probably need a specialist developer to retain the old Edwardian frontage. I've already had a meeting with one such company who are very interested. I've got some plans. They sort of were, this is well before COVID, but they were very enthusiastic about talking to the council about that. So I can have assurance that you'd be open as well to the idea of actually splitting the site, if that was possible to do.
Councillor Turner.
Until we get that viability report back and the state of what that condition is, we can't say whether we split the site or not. We may create one, we may be able to develop one part, make one site part unviable. So those are the decisions that will go through the planning process. And as we talk to either developers who want to buy it or whether we work with the partnership to develop, those will be discussions for later on down the line. But we can't risk
developing one part and leaving one part to rot if it's not viable. So it is a planning decision. Part of it's a planning decision, but part of it's who we work with, whether it's a sale or whatever. But we will look into it.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Michael Watson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is to the Cabinet Member for the Children's Portfolio, Councillor Kendrick. If I may, I'd just like to start by thanking you for that briefing, which I found to be very useful, very informative and very positive, and also to acknowledge your personal commitment to the children of our area, which I also always find to be very supportive and very encouraging as well. But what I'd like to do is I'd just like to turn to the right slightly and turn away from the children and turn to think about carers. And if one looks at the Kirklees Council website, under the heading Breaks for Carers, the website says that getting a break can be vital to help you stay healthy and maintain good well-being. There are a few ways to do this. And then it goes on to list a number of options, one of which is respite care for the person that you care for. Respite care, and the website says that respite care means taking a break from caring while the person you care for is looked after by someone else on a temporary basis. Now, one of the facilities that's mentioned on the website in this context is Orchard View, which I understand to be a facility in Mirfield which should provide respite care for families with children with special needs. And that, as I understand, is in excess of 150 families throughout Kirklees, which would normally rely upon Orchard View to provide much-needed breaks from their caring responsibilities, usually of around 2 days a month. I also understand that Orchard View has been closed since April of this year and therefore has not been providing that respite care since then. Is my understanding of the situation correct? And if so, have alternative arrangements been made to provide these families caring for children with special needs with the respite that they rely upon over the last 6 months? Thank you.
Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. I know exactly where you're coming from, and there was a situation early this year where 2 young people with additional needs and quite severe challenges meant the only place we could house them was in Orchard View, and it was not seen as safe or appropriate to have other children there. And that was the reason that was closed. My understanding it is open now, but I also have been asking as to what other alternatives we are providing for carers. I am still waiting for an answer on that, but I only asked it a few days ago as such. I am concerned, you know, that we haven't been able to provide as much as we would have done for families during that period. But, you know, it was also about the 2 young people that were housed there, and also about how right it was to have other children in the same environment. But, you know, I should have an answer very shortly, and I will share that with you to confirm that there is provision.
Councillor Watson, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just acknowledging a comment that was made by Councillor Scott earlier on, which was to the effect that when we raise these kind of issues at full council, it really should be the end of the road. It really would be taking it to the top, having exhausted all other opportunities, which is essentially why I find myself here today asking these questions. My understanding and the information I have got is different to what you're being told, I think, in that I am being told that this facility is not open. And whilst the needs of these 2 children may be important, we appear to have completely disregarded the needs of the 150 families, or however many it is, that are desperately reliant upon this facility to provide them with respite care from their responsibilities and their caring duties. So following from that, there are a couple of points that you might like to take back as part of your questioning, and these would be these questions. Firstly, is it correct that Orchard View is equipped with specialist lifting? And I can give you these written copy afterwards, but is it correct that Orchard View is equipped with specialist lifting and handling equipment that enables a high level of care to be given to children with very special needs when placed in respite care? Or has the equipment been removed in part or in whole, with Orchard View now being used to provide accommodation facilities instead of respite for carers? And secondly, if it is the case that it's still closed or not operating at full capacity, Is there a plan for the provision of respite care to Kirklees carers of children with special needs going forward? And if so, what will that plan deliver?
Councillor Kendrick.
I welcome your list of questions. I am of an age that I can't remember what I had for breakfast, so, you know. Thank you. I understand exactly where you're coming from, and it does seem disproportionate that a lot of carers may have had to wait or have different provision because of 2 young people. But actually, if there is nowhere that we can place those 2 young people, what is it we do with them? That's the issue. I understand one has now moved along, and I think accommodation has now been found for the second one, which is why I think Orchard View is functioning again, but I may be incorrect in that. I welcome your list if you want to give it me at the end, and I'm happy to make sure all councillors are aware of what the situation is.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Councillor Mark Watson. Sorry, beg your pardon. Mark Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. The question is to the Cabinet Member for Housing, Councillor Scott. And my question is reference to the bringing back into the fold K&H or KHN now. And it's reference to if that decision and the action that came after the decision has been the right one. Meaning, is K&H now better than it was under the stewardship of the Cabinet? And what mechanics do you use to make sure that it is better? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Your question about K&H coming back in, was it the right decision? Yes, we feel it was the right decision. And I'm conscious that there's that gap where there's not been a feedback when we should possibly have come back with the feedback to give you, let you know how things are going. For me, I think it's going at a nice pace at the moment. We're doing a lot of different things, and people and staff, and the reassurance is there for them, and how we do things differently, slightly different. Services continuity as usual, but I'm happy to bring back to this council an update report, a presentation to talk it through, so you could have, quite a few questions on that, because I do see there's that gap where we've not fed back, but it's still, is it about 18 months in, I believe, 18 months in, so we did say, I think it was nearly 18 months to 2 years, we would be coming back. So if you can bear with me, Councillor Thompson, happy to have that conversation with you by email or face-to-face. But what I will do is ensure that we get something back to Council so that you can all be given that reassurance. But first and foremost, it's the reassurance to the public out there, all our tenants, that we are doing what we said we'd do, and the compliance and everything, we're on target for that.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Thompson, do you have a supplementary question? Thank you. Councillor Martin Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to the Leader. What are you and the Mayor's representative doing to resolve the problems caused to our passengers, and in particular young people, during the recent bus service changes? Under the collective responsibility that you have in signing the enhanced partnership, do you accept that leaving incorrect timetables at remote locations, such as one I have here dated 1st of September, showing bus services which do not operate through that remote location, which are still up today, some time after the changes were made, do you accept that that is inexcusable and very poor service, and could be dangerous for passengers, vulnerable people left waiting for buses which clearly don't go past there? And again, under collective responsibility and as a signatory, do you have any concerns about the effectiveness of the West Yorkshire Enhanced Partnership Scheme?
Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Martin. We had quite a lot of conversation, a lot of questions that were asked of me at the last council meeting, as you remember, regarding the inadequacy of the bus service. And Arriva was one of the bus providers that are not delivering as they should be doing. I have a meeting tomorrow morning, 8:30, with the other leaders and the Mayor, and this is going to be one of the big issues that we're going to be discussing. In terms of the enhanced partnership, I don't think that it's actually delivering what it should be delivering. On the back of the pandemic, the bus companies did get a lot of money, and the money that they got and the extension of the grants that they were given so that bus services carry on the way they are. And it's very, very clear from not just this meeting, but the previous meeting as well, that they're not delivering what they should be delivering. I, along with other leaders, are actually banging on the door with the Mayor to actually make sure that they do deliver. And the whole thing needs a complete shake-up. What that shake-up is, must deliver better services to our patronage who use buses and to actually increase bus patronage, because if you want to try and get people off the road using the cars into public transport, you've got to make sure that the services are delivered. So I really appreciate you bringing it today, and I will make sure that I take the feedback that you've provided back tomorrow morning, Councillor Bolt. Thank you.
Councillor Bott, do you have a supplementary question?
Indeed, Mr Mayor. When you're taking that feedback, will you reflect on what Arriva have said publicly, that, and their quotes are, frustratingly, with no compensation to operators, an expectation we'll soak up the costs of extra resources, poor planning and lax partnership, the districts need to be held accountable for traffic delays due to controllable factors on their road network. In other words, and as we see with the 229 rerouted down the A62, the 229 runs late by the time it gets to Cooper Bridge because of Leeds Road delays. It then runs late getting through Hetman, Wright and Bursell Smithies at peak times. These are the delay factors that Arriva are mentioning. In North Kirklees, and I appreciate that as a Huddersfield-based councillor you might not see this as much as we do, but in North Kirklees we see no light at the end of that tunnel, because the timing of your cabinet project is that Leeds Roads will finish towards the end of 2023, and then Cooper Bridge will immediately start for a 3-year delay project, so that the potential of running efficient and on-time bus services is restricted by the problems of highway enhancements. And this is what Arriva are saying, that the districts need to be held accountable for traffic delays due to controllable factors in their road network. And I hope you will robustly take that up as well.
Councillor Pando.
If we let Arriva on the back foot, trying to actually pass the book on, I'll take that on, Martin, because and if you can send me that link over, that'd be appreciated.
I'd love to send a leader the link, but as he's blocked me on social media, I can't.
Martin, Mr Mayor, Martin, I will unblock you as long as you promise to behave yourself, because although I really value the conversations we have, and I really love you, you know that, yeah? But I think the way you behaved in recent months, I had to block you. But I will quite gladly unblock you, and you can send me the link. I'll do it straight after the meeting. But behave yourself, mate. All right.
Thank you, Councillor Pando. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think I follow that. Anyway, yes, my question is about buses as well, because as many wards in North Kirklees, Bristol and Berkshire have also suffered from reduction in services. And it does seem to be one particular bus company that seems to be having a lot of the problems, and it needs to be addressed. But for the combined authority, I notice on the Transport Committee minutes, on the Transport Committee agenda for Friday, it says there is a bus network plan going to be consulted on, and they're going to, during November and December, they're going to have local engagement. Can I ask that when you're having these discussions tomorrow, that we actually get some appointments in diaries for people to have local discussions about local transport plans, because it is getting to a stage now where the reductions in services are affecting many, many people. But it also talks about the mass transport 2040 vision. This is going out for statutory consultation on the 17th of October, and it's going out, I think, through Your Voice. Can we also have some local engagement on the mass transport 2040? I know it's a long time frame, but the last iteration of the document, for instance, had part of our ward in South Bradford. But, you know, apart from being factual, we also need to see what the plans are for people to be able to comment on something that is so key for the future of transport in our area. So can we please have some local consultation on that as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. I can't answer for Mayor Brabin, but I will take that feedback on, and you're absolutely right. You need to have that proper engagement, not least with local councillors across the five districts, but I'll take that back on. Mass transit is an opportunity, but at the same time, it will cause a lot of issues, and I completely get that. So as long as we make sure that we engage properly politically, then I can see that we can navigate through that. Because, like I said at the last meeting, we are the only core city area, Leeds City region, that does not have a mass transit network, which doesn't really enable us to actually grow our economy the way we want, get the skills and the infrastructure in place. But I will take that on board. Thank you very much.
Councillor Smith, do you have a supplementary question? No, that's fine. Okay. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. For the leader, you said something earlier about Liz Truss's pledge of no cuts being of great reassurance to you. Given that no cuts doesn't mean a reasonable and fair settlement that enables us to run our services with no cuts, how reassured do you actually feel? Tell truth and shame the devil. Come on.
Councillor Panda.
That was tongue-in-cheek. You know, I've got absolute confidence in what Liz Truss said. And I'm hoping that she just don't cut the public services, but she puts that billions of pounds back in to local government that we've seen over the last 12 years. But she said it, and Keir Starmer said, can you please repeat that? And what she said was, yes, I will make sure that we'll do it. And, you know, that's what gave me the confidence. And I just hope that there's no more U-turns on that.
Councillor Lawson, do you have a supplementary? No. Okay. It is now 9 o'clock. That's slow, by the way. I might as well tell you that. I'm now closing the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending.